Okay. I would like to call to order the Albany City Council meeting of Tuesday, September 3rd, 2019. It is 7:30 p.m. Let's see. Oh, okay. Yeah, call to order. Let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. Vice Mayor McQuaid will lead us. We use the traditional Pledge of Allegiance before the addition of the words, under God.
Present.
Councilmember Moss.
Present.
Councilmember Pilch will be late. Vice Mayor McQuaid.
Here.
Mayor Nason.
Here. Thank you. We will start off with ceremonial matters. We have two tonight, and we will begin with the presentation to Mechanics Bank. And I think that Mr. Alabanza is with us tonight. And what I wanted to say is, from the time that I started getting involved in Albany municipal affairs, I cannot count the number of events that I have been to at Mechanics Bank. I think that the film festival always has a gala event. The Solano Stroll has a gala event. And the bank supports this community in so very many ways. It's quite remarkable. And I have served on the board of directors of Chaparral House, which, although it's in Berkeley, it serves our community as the nonprofit nursing home for our area. And again, Mechanics Bank is a tremendous supporter. So Mr. Alabanza, will you meet me at the podium? The Albany City Council commends Mechanics Bank in recognition of generous and long-standing support for Albany's civic and charitable institutions, which has done much to build our community and assure its health and prosperity into the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our next ceremonial matter is the Proclamation of United Against Hate Week. Vice Mayor McQuaid.
We have with us tonight Jacqueline McCormick from the Chief of Staff for the Mayor of the City of Berkeley, representing the United Against Hate Week Steering Committee. City of Albany Proclamation in honor of United Against Hate Week, November 17th to 23rd, 2019. Whereas since January 2017, there has been an alarming increase in fringe ideologies using hatred as a means of intimidation, and whereas numerous policy positions, from wanting to build a wall to most recently separating families at the border, combined with the actions and rhetoric of the president, have fueled a normalization of hateful and racist discourse. And whereas attacks on immigrants, Muslims, people of color, women, Jewish people, the LGBTQ+ community, and our most vulnerable are now commonplace, resulting in an uptick in hate crimes and the open promotion of xenophobic ideas. And whereas places of worship, including synagogues, churches, mosques, festivals, shopping malls, and nightclubs, have become the targets of white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and others espousing hatred. And whereas in 2018, responding to these events and to clearly state our shared values, Berkeley developed the Berkeley Stands United Against Hate campaign, which was adopted by Albany as well as many other cities in the Bay Area. and served as a uniting and hopeful beacon during a challenging time, declaring our commitment to inclusivity. And whereas to further counter the divide currently facing our nation, cities across the Bay Area are organizing the second United Against Hate Week that will take place November 17th to 23rd, 2019. And whereas events will focus on breaking through positionality, communicating in conflict, and working together to achieve common goals, promoting education, compassion, and cooperation, which are key to embracing differences between people. Now, therefore, the Albany City Council hereby proclaims November 17th to 23rd as United Against Hate Week in Albany, and will support and encourage appropriate educational and community events. There you go.
I just want to thank the City of Albany, who is always our #1 first partner, not only in United Against Hate Week, but thank you so much, Vice Mayor McQuaid, for all of your partnership and friendship, and knowing that I can always count on you. You're always going to be there. I've brought signs for you for the stroll, help yourself, and if you run out at the stroll, we'll have a bunch down in the mayor's booth for the City of Berkeley up at that end, so help yourself. And again, big thanks to Albany. We're such great partners, not only in this, but in trying to save Alta Bates and our struggle with that, and our struggle and our care for homelessness, and so many other things that we have in common. We cherish your partnership and your friendship. Thanks.
My oversight, sorry. Okay,
Hi, Jason.
see, everyone knows Jason Alabanza for precisely the reason that we are honoring his employer tonight. Thank you. So we turn to the to the report on action taken in closed session, if any. Closed session was held and direction was given to the staff. And we move along to the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the Council. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or a member of the audience requests removal of the item from the consent calendar. So do we have requests for items to be pulled from the consent calendar from the council?
5-7.
5-7. Any others?
5-6 from the public.
From the public. Okay, hold. Okay, right now just from the council. I would like 5-8 just for a brief comment. So let's check with the public. Do we have items that the public would like to have pulled from the consent calendar? I believe the city clerk has one. He says not to do it. Okay, anything from the audience? All right, then let's go ahead to 5-7. Councilmember Pilch, are you looking for a staff report or is it a quick question?
Neither. I wanted to mention that when we approved the action on cannabis policy to bar all cannabis activities except for deliveries in Albany, we discussed revisiting it. Well, we actually directed ourselves to revisit it in 20 months or so. I believe this is the time of the revisiting. So the fact that this is a consent item, I don't think is the appropriate thing. I think this is a matter that should be agendized for action if we want to make any action. So I will request that it be made a future agenda item for action for consideration of any changes to policy. And I would say that I would like to make a few comments about it, that certainly the cannabis SB 62, I think it was, or I'm probably getting that number wrong, but it was not perfect. It was not perfectly implemented. The revenue was less than was expected. Still, that it's hundreds of millions of dollars of new revenue for the state. I think we've found that the way that it was constructed needs a little tweaking, especially since it does seem that illegal activity has not been curtailed, and that's one thing that certainly we do want to curtail. But one of the problems is that 80% of the community, so the legislation that allowed for cannabis, recreational and medical marijuana, cannabis dispensaries and growing in cities allowed for cities to opt out. And so 80% of cities have opted out, and Albany is one of them, effectively. And so we are part of the problem as well. If cities are not embracing that, then it's not, this is not what the state expected. The state did not expect most communities to opt out. So we have a chance to capture capture a bit of the legal market. Adults that want recreational cannabis have now legal ways to get it. So that's a good thing. They don't have to go illegal ways, and Albany has a chance to generate new business and generate new business revenue and take a cut of taxes. So I think we need to revisit that to see if we want to make any changes here.
Can I make a comment on
Certainly.
the sort of procedure? I think actually this is probably more directed to you. Am I correct that Planning and Zoning was actually the body to take this up again in the 20 months, and it is coming on their agenda?
Good evening. This actually went to the Planning and Zoning Commission at their second meeting in July. So when the ordinance was adopted, the council gave direction to revisit it in 20 months with commission review. So that's what we did. We provided them an informational report similar to the report you have in your packet this evening.
And they took no action?
They took no action other than receiving the report, but they did indicate that if the council were to provide different direction and pursue regulations to allow it as a permitted use in the city, they would be happy to work with staff to craft those regulations.
They took no action, but the staff report states that they were in favor of licensing cannabis activities in the city, and they had previously recommended that we do so.
Please.
Yeah, I had a question. You have that overall figure of revenues for the state being about a third, or maybe a little more than a third of what had been anticipated. Is there information out there on how revenues for some of our surrounding cities have been for Richmond or Berkeley or any of the cities that have allowed cannabis to be sold?
I haven't done that much research into what their revenue collection is. I know Berkeley is very much a work in progress. They have their own cannabis commission that has been working to craft regulations and appropriate taxation rates. Unfortunately, I don't have that information to provide to the council.
I think that would be really useful for me in terms of looking forward, because just taking that big photo of the state as opposed to what's going on around here could be very different. I would agree with Councilman Pilch that this is something that I think we had agreed upon to revisit in something more than just an information packet on the consent calendar. So I'm hoping we can agendize this in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. And if you'll please remind me, when we do come to future agenda items, let's mention it under that agenda item as well. Okay, any public comments on this, on the cannabis policy?
Hi, good evening. My name's Ian McLeod. I'm a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and this item did come to us about a month ago, and I was frankly a little surprised that there was a prohibition in Albany, and I was really wondering why. It's legal in the state of California. Albany voters approved it. You know, I could understand that maybe there's a lack of resources to supervise or implement some sort of cannabis distribution center. But personally, I wanted to hear from council why there is a prohibition, both to help me when it comes back to me for any kind of decision. We weren't actually asked to make a decision or bring this back as an item to legalize it. We were just asked for feedback. From my point of view, illegal cannabis growing is very environmentally destructive. It's incredibly destructive of our national forests, other natural areas where hillsides are cleared illegally. There's terrible stream runoff, horrible pesticide use. It's also illegal cannabis. It's part of organized crime. I think we should support measures that reduce illegal cannabis use. And I would like to see Albany adopt some measure that would allow dispensaries in Albany. From what I understand from my other commissioners, crime is low at existing fairly new centers in other cities. Commissioner Waddy mentioned that in San Francisco, crime is really not an issue around centers. One problem we have in Albany is that with the buffer zones, the overlapping buffer zones from schools and parks and things like that, that it may in fact be a de facto ban. So we have to look at the buffer zones and where a dispensary could be sited to make it realistically possible. So for your consideration, but I personally would like to understand why there is a prohibition, and moving forward, take that, you know, under advisement for any future decisions. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any final comments from the council?
Well, I might try to field an answer to that question a little bit. I think in the minds of myself and I think some of the others, when cannabis was legalized, it was a new thing, and at least from what my perspective, the state didn't really have their whole thing together. It was very untogether in a lot of ways. And so I think the 2 years that we decided on was a chance to see what was going on elsewhere, what was working, what isn't working, and we have that hindsight now. So perhaps in the future we might change this.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I'd say this, we never adopted a prohibition. We, of course, do have the deliveries and the home growing. What we didn't do was create a regulatory framework that would allow us to have the commercial have commercial sales within Albany. And as Councilmember Moss said, we kind of wanted to see with larger cities how it worked out. This often is an issue because of Albany's very small size, and we're not one of those isolated small towns that is still the biggest town in its area. We are both small and beside all these larger cities. So it seemed likely that Albany people's demand for cannabis could be satisfied, if not by deliveries or home growing. There would certainly be dispensaries within easy reach for us. And so there was no prohibition. There was a deferral of consideration if we were going to adopt some kind of regulatory framework to allow commercial dispensaries. And I think that that is a reasonable thing to request that come back on the agenda so we can review how those things are doing.
I must disagree, Madam Mayor. I don't know how to view our action taken other than a prohibition of almost all activities except for deliveries. Growing is prohibited and sales are prohibited.
Growing is not prohibited.
Are we off the agenda topic?
No, I don't think so. Commercial growing is prohibited.
Commercial growing.
More fully.
Pardon?
I'm happy to put this on a future agenda so we can have a
Yeah,
notice
let's
discussion
do
of the
that.
item.
But just for clarity, commercial growing is not, there is no
Prohibited.
allowance for it.
Call it what you may.
It is not a
There are
it is
prohibitions.
not a permitted activity, nor is pig farming, nor are a lot of things. And they're not necessarily bad things, but they may or may not be appropriate in Albany. But everyone is free to grow their own. That is, there are grow your own rules that people should be aware of if they have an interest. Okay, anything further? All right. Moving on, number 5.8, Solano Avenue Complete Streets Study Final Draft. I'm glad to see this. And I just wanted to make the comment that as we look at corridors, whether it's the Solano corridor or the San Pablo corridor or whatever corridor of whatever type, that I hope that we look holistically at all the different ways that people get around in one direction or another. I have been thinking about this as I've been driving along Marin Avenue and being somewhat disappointed by the relatively low, what seems to me the relatively low usage of our bike path along Marin and how we can help people feel safer. To me, that is part of looking at our corridors and thinking about how people get around town. And that is all that I had to say about that. Does anyone, are there public comments or questions about this? Questions?
No question, but just a comment that appreciate the mayor's comments about that. I think that what the council needs to, the council's decision on this or the council's reflection on this is complex because we have to view the modes and their current usage, what we want the usage to be, the effect on climate change, the available streetscape, all of these things. And it's a very complex equation that we're dealing with, and I'm glad that we'll be revisiting it again.
Thank you. Any comments from the public? Okay, anything? We've got a comment.
Hi, Ken McCroskey, Albany resident, member of Strollers and Rollers. It's great to see that this Complete Streets is moving ahead and that you've developed a way to deal with the issues. It's great. I do want to respond to the mayor's comments. And I would say that the Marin Avenue bike lanes are an example of a place where somebody who's very risk tolerant would be willing to bicycle. And as an example of a previous thinking as to how best people get out on bicycles, or get people out on bicycles. Again, it's an example of what we estimate are about 15% of people who might want to ride a bicycle would feel comfortable riding on a bike lane like Marin, because you're right next to moving traffic at 25 to 30 miles an hour. And it turns out that there aren't any businesses on Marin. So unless you're going to a home on Marin, it might not be a part of your route. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got another comment.
Good evening again, Ian McLeod. Bicycle networks really don't work unless they're really connected and continuous. So that's why Marin Avenue may not seem like it gets a whole lot of activity. There's just not a whole lot of connection to it. I was just at a bicycle and active transportation workshop, partly sponsored by Spur in San Francisco and MTC, and there's a current process underway. It's 9 counties, Bay Area wide, to promote active transportation through a new ballot measure. And it's to create a connected and continuous bike network throughout the 9 Bay Area counties, throughout cities, cross city boundaries, cross regional boundaries, cross bridges, new bike bridges. It works when they have a place to go that connects to other places to go and connects to mass transit, BART stations. So it really is a holistic idea, and it's not just bicycles, it's scooters, it's motorized skateboards, it's those one-wheeled things that people stand on that I saw somebody on today. But it's got to be comprehensive, and there's opportunities here. There's this, Solano Avenue is a great opportunity. I think it's been a missed opportunity in this case, in this study. San Pablo is a great opportunity to create a protected bicycle infrastructure that does exactly that. It links cities across the region and connects bike networks and will make them successful. So I think the idea is to get more people into active transportation, out of cars, reduce greenhouse gases. It actually makes our cities more livable, and it actually improves business districts from everything I've been reading, and I've been reading a lot about it. So areas where cities have put in protected bike lanes in commercial streets, retail sales have either maintained or gone up. So it's not something like it's parking or bikes and the business district dies. It's nothing like that at all. So I think we have to look at it also as an economic development opportunity, especially for San Pablo corridor, which right now is a pretty abysmal place to be. It's not a place anybody would want to hang out, and I think we can improve it a lot through making different kind of infrastructure choices. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. All good points, and I would declare my own special concern about making sure that people feel safe and are indeed safe. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then I think that we are done with our consent. I have a question on 5.9, I'm sorry, just a quick one. This is the cooling centers. I'll make it simply a comment that I would love to see us consider smoke, a safe place from smoke events, as well as safe cooling centers on very hot days. Sometimes when we have fires, even a great distance away, we have hazardous levels of smoke, and if we can offer safe places, I think that would be great. Any other comments or questions on this one? Any audience comments? Okay, then let's move along to good of the city. Yes. Pardon? Oh, yes, my apologies. Did not call for a motion to approve.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We go on to good of the city, public comment. For persons desiring to address the City Council on an item that is not on the agenda, please note that city policy limits each speaker up to 3 minutes. The Brown Act limits the council's ability to take or discuss items that are not on the agenda, so such items are normally referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda. Do we have any speaker cards?
Alan Maris, Brian Beal, and Peter Goodman.
So I have two things. First of all, I'd like to thank you for approving the permit for the Albany Triathlon. This is the 10th Albany Triathlon. It's a great community event, promotes fitness in the community as well as provides funding for the athletic programs in our school district. Secondly, I attended satellite affordable housing presentation last week, and was really favorably impressed with the potential for this affordable housing project in Albany, in Washington, and Cleveland. My one concern is that when we look at our general plan housing element, about half the need in that housing element is for very low-income housing. The potential is there to satisfy significantly that need in our general plan for very low-income housing. I think we need to make sure a significant amount, maybe even half, of that new affordable housing is for very low-income residents of Albany. It's not clear yet right now because the financial aspects of that project are still being developed. But if we get significant funding from the state and county, I think it's very doable to meet the needs of our very low-income residents in Albany with that affordable housing project presented by Satellite Affordable Housing. I'm really encouraged, and we'll continue to monitor the progress. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Nason, Vice Mayor McQuaid, City Council members, members of the public. I'm Brian Beal here on behalf of the Albany Democratic Club. I wanted to invite you to join us this coming Sunday, September 8th, at the Solano Stroll. We'll have a booth up in the political neighborhood near 1700 block of Solano, near Vanessa. You'll be able to help pick the next candidate for president by participating in our straw poll. And that is if we can actually determine how many candidates there actually are in the presidential race. The number is changing rapidly. And I also wanted to announce our next meeting, which will be Thursday, September 19th at the Community Center. We'll be having Dana Dean, who is the president of the California County Boards of Education. She's also been elected to a number of other titles and helps, her kind of part-time thing is helping women to get elected. So she's a graduate of Emerge California. She's going to be speaking on that topic, and that's one of our focuses as the club is increasing diversity on the city council. We have an election coming up next November. 3 seats will be opening up on the city council, and we would like to encourage anybody who has any thought at all about running to start looking into it. And if you're a woman or a minority, this will be a good chance to, or even a white male like me, it'll be a good meeting to come to. So again, that's Thursday, September 19th at 7 o'clock at the Stone Room. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Peter Goodman, and I'm an Albany resident. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Albany Arts Committee. I just want to start with this. Head bowed while phoning, jacket zipper up, hat on, waiting for the bus. This is an example of a haiku that was turned into the Fall into Haiku program a while back. It's by Elizabeth Lyon. And it's an excuse for me to say that our Fall into Haiku program, the fourth one we've done, submissions have opened. And there's still some time left. We're going to close submissions on October 1st. So I'm hoping to encourage everyone in the city to go to the website, www.albanyca.org/haiku, and submit your poem. That's kids, grown-ups. And just because you're on the city council doesn't mean you don't have a poetic soul. So I'd like to hear.
Actually,
well, maybe some of you.
Actually, it's a job requirement.
It is a job requirement, right? So this is a very fun program. People seem to like it. We get maybe a couple hundred submissions every year. We pick fewer than 100. About half of them go on signboards like this, and they go through the commercial areas of the city. Another half of them go on big box. They've got those little poster windows, and we put them there. And those are kind of throughout the city, including in some of the parks. And they're up for about 3 weeks or so, and then we take them down. I think it'll be sometime before Thanksgiving to sometime into early December. So remember, the deadline's October 1st. The theme this year is Hills and Bay, and basically that suggests hills and bay and everything in between. So you've got a huge swath of geographic territory to pull from when you're thinking about what your haiku should be. There will be a haiku party of sorts where you can come. We're going to have laptops set up. This being managed by Becca Black, the city's poet laureate, on Wednesday, September 25th, 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the Edith Stone Room. So if you'd like to sort of do it on kind of a community basis, come to Edith Stone that night. And one final thing, this program is somewhat at risk because we kind of lost our funding through the city. This year it's very generously supported by the Albany Community Foundation. I don't know if that's going to happen in next year, and if we don't get funding, it won't happen. It costs under $1,000 to do it. Anyway, you're all welcome to submit, so hope to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speaker cards, or do we have anyone in the audience who would like to make a public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to council reports, and we start with City Council subcommittees. Tonight, we will have a report of the San Pablo Avenue Corridor Subcommittee, and Councilmember Pilch will deliver that for us.
I don't have a written report. I did not have time to write that up, but there essentially hasn't been any progress on that. We did have a meeting, which was previously reported on, with ACTC staff and advocates, and that was in June, I believe, around June. I think some of the members of the public were there. Subsequent to that, we have not heard anything from ACTC on this subject. The subcommittee also did meet with Jeff Bond of the city to talk through the nexus between the San Pablo Avenue Corridor project from ACTC and our own efforts on San Pablo Corridor, and how we might think about joining these efforts, or the implications for having both jurisdictions being interested in changes in the corridor. And that's about it to report on that aspect. Unless the mayor has anything to add.
Nope,
Okay.
that sounds
Okay, great.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you. We go on to city, unless there is any other subcommittee activity to report. We move along to the City Council appointed representation of Albany. I have done a written report which will be posted tomorrow with the documents for this meeting, and I believe there are copies in the back, yes. And basically, just very quickly, there were a couple of meetings in July of the Alameda County Mayor's Conference regarding homeless issues, and in particular, the possibility of repurposing the Glenn Dyer facility in Oakland as a homeless facility. It has about 834 beds, so there is some potential for a very significant capacity shelter. But as you could imagine, the organizational obstacles are great, but mayors are meeting to discuss the possibility. A subcommittee of the mayor's conference is being formed to look into this, essentially an offer that Alameda County has made to Oakland and the mayor's conference with respect to homelessness. There were also July meetings of the Alameda County Transportation Commission and of the Stop Waste, the Alameda County Waste Management Board, and the Energy Council. With regard to the latter, I think that everyone in town who owns property should by now have received a notice about setting of the household hazardous waste fee. It's actually being set down, which is quite wonderful and unusual. And the process is also proposed to be changed, to have this setting process occur less frequently, which, especially since it's going down, I think is a very good thing, and it will take effect if there are not objections. The other is the Alameda County Transportation Commission, and I've provided links to a couple of things that may be of interest to people who follow Alameda County transportation issues. One is there's a formal report on the commission retreat that several of us participated in, and there is also, well, what was an update. Of course, things are moving very fast in Sacramento right now, but there was an update as of that late July date on various bills pending in Sacramento on housing and legislative policy. So that's it for me for appointed representation. Do we have any other reports on such representation?
So the last ABC meeting of the summer occurred right after, in the same week that our last council meeting occurred in July. Some of the focus of discussion in this meeting and past meetings has been the energy, how much of each type of energy we put into each different product. There's a product that is cheaper than PG&E. There's a product that's on parity with PG&E, which is renewable, and then there's a product which is which is greenhouse gas free, the one that's on parity with PG&E, and the premium product is 100% renewable product. There's been talk among some of the advocates that we should increase our percentage of both greenhouse gas free and renewable in the other products, in the non-premium products, and that we have the ability to do so. EBC staff wants to make sure that we're on good financial ground before we make any big changes in this area, particularly seeing that PG&E is in such a perhaps fragile state right now. So the PG&E bankruptcy was discussed a bit, and we have a new chair of EBC, which is Councilmember Dan KALB from Oakland, and the vice chair is Councilmember Martinez from Emeryville. And there will be a subcommittee meeting of EBC tomorrow, which is the finance and the legislative and something else subcommittee, which I'm a member of. And I think that's it for appointed representation.
Thank you. Any other council members wish to report on appointed representation? Then we move on to general meetings and events. I don't mind starting this. Well, actually, Vice Mayor McQuaid, maybe why don't we start actually on my left? We'll go with Nick Pilch. Do you have any
thank you.
Meetings you wanted to report?
Sure, thank you for blessing me with going first so many times. The only thing I have to mention is I did attend and this, I don't know if this falls, this is not kind of in a gray area. It's not appointed representation, but I did attend as a representative of the city, the EV, Electric Vehicle Coordinating Council, which is a meeting which is facilitated by the BACMUD, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and we went through a number of topics. The discussion was a bit light. It was summer, and there wasn't a lot of city representation there, which is not surprising because most cities take August off, and the meeting occurred in August. But I will say that I did notice once again that although there's a surge of electric vehicle interest and purchase, and especially in the Bay Area, the state and the country is still lagging behind in charging stations. And I remained a little bit dumbfounded why more of our state representatives haven't stepped up and tried to move this part of the equation forward, because certainly there's a lot of interest in electrical vehicles. And I think that was about it for that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor McQuaid.
Okay, I held the community leaders meeting that we started several years ago in July, with the focus topic being the Housing Authority of Alameda County. I attended the Solano Avenue Association Art Walk, several United Against Hate meetings, East Bay Division of the League of California Cities meeting, the Pension Board, a CERT meeting. I think several of us were Belmont Village for their second anniversary celebration. I think most of us were at National Night Out and the Stroll Kickoff Party. Along with Mayor Nason, I attended or participated in a conference call with climate mayors. She and I met with the county auditor and assessor. As she mentioned, we toured the Glendyre Jail. We also did a presentation on women in politics as part of the Film Fest. I attended the Everyone Home Leadership Board, Coffee with the Cops. Several of us were at the Saha presentation. And we also, several of us were at the Cheryl Gates Craft Room dedication last week.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Barnes, do you have any reports that you'd like to make on events?
I have been out of town quite a bit the last month or so, and unless you want to hear about bike touring in Oregon, I'll probably leave it there.
I'd love to hear about bike touring in Oregon, but we won't go there. Councilmember Moss.
Yeah, just some of the ones that were mentioned, the Gates craft room initiation, and also the Saha presentation on their affordable housing project. Otherwise, I also and the family were out of town for a good part of August.
Yes, yes. Summer is quiet. Well, I, as mentioned by Vice Mayor McQuaid and by Councilmember Moss, I attended a number of those events, the community leaders in Belmont Village and the kickoff and National Night Out and Climate Mayors and so forth, Saha. The craft room dedication was remarkable. Cheryl Gates, I wish that I had had a chance to know her. It's great that we have named that after her. Other items include, let's see, the Albany Greenway Cleanup Day. It's always wonderful to see people coming out to clean up the parks. I attended the a ribbon cutting at the Bank of America, their new financial center. And Friends of Albany Seniors, I attended their board of directors meeting. Also an all-dog beach cleanup. Actually, with Vice Mayor McQuaid, I attended a night of healing held by Barbara Lee, our congresswoman, following various terrible incidents that happened across the country. And finally, the Friends of Albany Seniors Luau, which is a lovely event, and I recommend it highly to anyone who might hear about it next year. So I think that that's it for council member reports. We are ready for a city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. A couple updates for you. I've just been informed that in time for the Solano Stroll, the California chapter of the American Planning Association has selected Solano Avenue as one of 2 2019 Great Places in California.
Wow.
The designation recognizes places with special character and vibrancy.
Wonderful.
And although the council was on recess in August, welcome back, all of you. I know you were still busy, as was staff, and I have just a few things to report on while we were on recess. National Night Out was a huge success, and I want to take a moment to really recognize all the effort put into this by our police department for community policing and supporting our community. We had 41 registered blocks, which is huge for Albany. And thank you to the council members that came out for support that night, as well as all city staff that came out. And it's a great, great event. In terms of finance department, quick update for you. Our CAFR is underway, and we will have our auditors out in September. We look forward to having them here to conduct the initial audit. You may have seen also over August some signage go up through town. You can find your way around town now if you're looking for the community center or City Hall or the Greenway. I hope it's well received. It was a nice addition to my block. Also in Public Works, we are delighted to have a new management analyst joining us in early September. Devora Zaudner will be joining us, and we really look forward to helping add support to that department as they execute a very heavy workload. We have a number of community engagement, again, the unique partnership that we're building with public safety and neighborhood services. A great example of this recently was the annual fire drill down at Gateview, down here in the condominiums on Pierce Street. And over 200 people attended the event and learned about disaster preparedness and public safety, including both police and fire departments on site. I think this was just a wonderful and well-received event. And that type of event is open to anyone in town seeking that type of information. We also have a half-day shelter simulation training coming up, supported by the Red Cross. And that will be on October 5th from 9 to noon at the Senior Center, as well as a Smart Start driver safety education for teens and parents, guardians, which will be on Thursday, October 17th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Community Center. This is hosted by a partnership between our police department and California Highway Patrol. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have no presentations this evening, so we go directly to 10-1, proposed ordinance permitting parking in the Parkway on the north side of Washington Avenue. Could we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, members of the council. The ordinance before you tonight is part of the implementation of the Washington Avenue Traffic Calming CIP project. Briefly, the council approved the elements of the project last February. In June, the contract was approved and it should be constructed within the next month. The approved design is intended to balance the needs of pedestrian access, emergency vehicle access, and parking by permitting vehicles to mount the curb on one side and maintaining a clear sidewalk on the other side. As part of the project approval, council directed staff to prepare an ordinance authorizing closure of the northern sidewalk to pedestrians and to allow vehicles to park on the northern sidewalk on Washington Avenue from Pierce Street to Cerrito Street. The ordinance before you makes two changes to the municipal code to permit parking as designed and to support enforcement if vehicles park in a way that blocks the sidewalk or the travel lane. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions from the council? Councilmember Pilch?
Yes, so I thought our code already specified that there was to be no parking on sidewalks and that it was simply an activity that was overlooked currently by the police. Is there really a change, or is this just a making sure that people know about it sort of thing?
This does not change the rules regarding parking on the sidewalk. What it does is when we close the sidewalk on the northern side, it's going to make that a permitted parking activity.
Right. No, I thought I understand that part, but I thought the other part was that you said that it would enforce the direct enforcement of the no parking on sidewalks, but I thought that that was already part of the code.
So the second change is to specifically call out the parking, the areas that will be designated for parking will be designated with signage and with a line stripe that you have to stay within on Washington. That's going to look a little different than other areas. So the ordinance puts in the Muni Code a call out for the specific intent of the striping on Washington, and that parking outside of that is citable, so that enforcement can cite that specific element.
So it's specific to Washington in this case, you're saying? Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Moss?
Yeah, a question that just occurred to me, looking at that chart of a fire truck going down the middle of the street. So it's now allowed to park on essentially the sidewalk, but it's not required, is it? Or can cars, if somebody doesn't know the neighborhood or know of what's going on up there, if they just park on the street, we've essentially kind of diminished the thoroughfare of where the emergency service vehicles could go. But is that illegal? I mean, could we cite people for not parking on the sidewalk?
No, currently the rules in place are you have to park on the street, curbside parking. There's a stretch at the top of the hill that's red curb, but otherwise you would need to park fully in the street, not on the sidewalk to meet the current rules. But
So
the
if-
practice has been longstanding to mount the curb and maintain a wider through travel lane.
So ultimately, if we wanted to assure that there would always be enough room for these larger vehicles to go up and down the street, we may have to be looking at taking out the sidewalk or somehow making sure that cars park far enough over to allow passage.
So if people currently parked in the street now, you'd have the 7 feet, I'll go back to the drawing, you'd have 7 feet from either side. And so with the striping and with allowing the mounting on one side, we're gaining an extra 4 feet, so maintaining that 13 feet in the middle where parking is prohibited and citable.
I'm sorry, Justin, aren't you really saying that on the north side you have to park on the sidewalk? I think that's where Councilmember Moss is.
Sorry, yes.
This question.
With the new striping, you will have to park within a line that will designate that 3-foot strip that you have to stay outside
That's how you'll get people
of.
up on the sidewalk.
That's why we're calling out the citable parking over that, because that goes into the travel lane.
What is the enforcement schedule? And by that I mean, on day one, will people be ticketed for either being on the sidewalk on the south side or not being over far enough on the north side? Is there a kind of a rollout?
Police has been kept up to date on the schedule of this, but I haven't discussed the specifics of how they'll roll out the enforcement.
Thank
I envision it would roll out this similar to many of our programs with a notification and a warning period and then citations.
Okay, any other questions from the council?
Well, I have some comments. Because some of us actually went out there when we drove the fire truck down the street, so I remember the details pretty well. So those of you who are not familiar with Washington Street there, and yet somehow are fascinated by this issue, just in case there's anyone like that, the thing to remember, this is a super steep road that descends very steeply down to Pierce Street. So when you're facing west, which is what these diagrams say, you're facing very steeply downhill and you're looking out over the racetrack in the bay. Just a nod if I'm, yes, thank you. So I'm on target. So it's a little confusing because that little car logo on the right, that car really should be facing downhill. It shouldn't be facing uphill, but it's kind of hard with these drawings. And you can see the little curb cuts there. So on the south side, which is going to be coming uphill, is just a conventional parking structure. You know, you park against the curb, you curb your wheels, la-da-da. Now, on the north sidewalk, which is the steep downhill one, it's not really going to legally be a sidewalk anymore. So I think, and I'm not frankly recalling the resolution from the last time we went over this, but to me, you're going to leave the sidewalk looking like a sidewalk with a curb there? Or could we just not just knock it out and pave it over so it looks like conventional parking?
That's not in the current scope of the project, but that could be done in a future project. What we're doing with the current project is doing it with signage and striping.
So, you know, that's just going to be the confusion. People are going to be driving down the hill and going, wow, is that a sidewalk on the north side or not? Can I park there or not? And no, it should be good. We're going to put up signage, and which basically says, yes, you can park on what you think is a sidewalk. But at some point in the future, it might be useful to really get rid of the old sidewalk features, unless there's some drainage necessity for that curb there or something like that. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, now I have a question. I thought the original plan was to put physical barriers on the sidewalk at the corners. Like, I'm trying to think where there's one, I think, out here at by the Gill track, or you're not supposed to cross on one side, you're supposed to cross on the other side. So people would understand that it's not a sidewalk, it's actually a parking area. Has that idea been disappeared?
I'm not sure on the exact signage that is. I know there was discussion of barriers with the earlier discussion, but I wasn't managing the project. So I was bringing the ordinance together, but I can look at the design details.
I mean, that kind of makes sense and seems to be not terribly costly. Once you start ripping up cement, you're spending real money. Jeff, do you have any thoughts about that?
Your recollection is correct. There, as a part of the construction project, there will be some signage. I don't remember exactly what form it was going to take, but there will be something that would indicate to people to cross to the south side of the street. For pedestrians should cross to the south side of the street, and there'd be crosswalks and so forth where they would be able to do that safely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I guess follow up to that. So this isn't, we're amending the ordinance here, but I guess, have we seen or will we see the 100% design of the construction project?
Maybe, I don't know. I believe the council's approved that construction, contract a few months ago. I don't remember the exact time, but I think you've seen that.
Okay, yeah, okay. So maybe some of the confusion is just on the ordering of these things. Or maybe it's the right order, but it's just a little surprising.
Thank you. I think we'd probably all appreciate being refreshed on the striping and signage plan if when that becomes available. Any other questions from the council? Do we have any speaker cards for this item? Do we have anyone in the audience who is interested in talking with us about Washington traffic calming? No, then I think that we're, well, I bring it back to the council. Does anyone have further comments or a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move we introduce ordinance 201907 for first reading, amending the municipal code to permit parking in the Parkway on the north side of Washington from Pierce to Gateview and from Polk to Cerrito as designated by signage and striping, and to prohibit parking on the street outside of the designated areas.
I'll second.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes.
Mayor Mason?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
Very good. We move on to unfinished business. The first item of unfinished business is SB2 Grant Application Policy Direction. May we have a staff report, please?
All right, good evening. Before you tonight is both a status update of where we are in the SB2 application process, and we are also seeking direction from the City Council on a couple key components before we formally file our application with the State Department of Housing and Community Development. Specifically for your review tonight, we're looking to get guidance on two particular topics, the first of which is the geographic scope, which I'll get into, and then ultimately the type of planning document that you would like to see prepared out of this process. And just to refresh the council's memory, SB2 is part of a 15-bill housing package that was adopted in 2017 with the intent of addressing the state's housing shortage and high housing costs. The overall goal of the program is to make funding available to local governments throughout the state for the preparation, adoption, and implementation of plans that have the effect of streamlining housing approvals and increasing housing production. So under this grant, the city is eligible for a $160,000 grant that is non-competitive. So for our purposes, we would file the application and we're guaranteed to receive the money. Previously, we came to you in May of this year, and you adopted a resolution which authorized staff to prepare a grant application for the formal application submittal. At that time, we had discussed simply identifying the housing element opportunity sites as part of our work, and then also building in some flexibility to allow for the creation of a specific plan. So as part of the attachments to your report, you will see a scope of work and some example work. We are working with Lexington Planning, who will serve as the lead, and Urban Field Design Studio, which is an urban design firm that will work on the zoning code amendments, general plan amendment, and objective design guidelines. And just to give you an illustrative example, this is from attachment 5 of your staff report. These are some objective design guidelines that were prepared by Urban Field for the city of Fremont, and so it effectively lays out and graphically conveys sort of policy statements as well as ideal design that would be approved by the city. So this is our intent with objective design guidelines as this process commences. So we prepared the application and we submitted it to Placeworks, who is contracted with the state to review applications before their formal submittal. So they go through a pretty comprehensive checklist. And they've indicated to us that we need to refine our application further prior to the formal submittal. So within that, we actually need to address a couple of issues, the first of which is demonstrating how our planning efforts would result in an increase or an acceleration of housing production through our general plan and zoning ordinance. And as part of that, they're looking for an actual quantitative measure in terms of housing unit creation. They also provided feedback to us with respect to our CEQA scope. So the first question really for the council is looking at San Pablo Avenue. Previously, we looked at housing element opportunity sites only. So this would apply only to the sites that are identified within the 2015-2023 housing element. As we've gone through it, however, we wanted to come back to you and get some guidance as to including the corridor in its entirety, so from our city limit lines from El Cerrito to Berkeley, because what this ultimately does is it creates universal development standards for the entire corridor. It helps us in terms of potential housing unit capacity, which will also help us as we embark on our next housing element update in 2021. The added benefit is by expanding the geographic area, it doesn't actually change our project costs. So we'd be getting the same scope of work, just looked at more expansively within the San Pablo Avenue corridor. And then with respect to the second issue, as I mentioned before, there was an intent to kind of keep this flexible so that there could be the potential for a specific plan. Right now, the scope includes zoning ordinance amendments, general plan amendments, and the objective design guidelines, which would ideally come back to the council in December of 2020. It's quite possible that all of this work could be combined into a specific plan once the council takes action on those efforts. And just so that you're aware, kind of the differences between the two. If you take simply the existing scope without a specific plan, you would conclude this process would conclude in December of 2020, and it's funded entirely by the SB2 grant. If we go down the path of a specific plan, it will consolidate all of that effort into one uniform document. This will add about 4 months and probably an additional $60,000 because we're required under state law to do a utility infrastructure plan that we would be responsible for, but that is something that if it is the direction of the council, we can go down that path. Some questions that had come up, just so that the council is aware, there are other efforts going on kind of region-wide. The council, as I'm sure, is familiar with the Alameda County Transportation Commission Corridor Plan. We identify this because this is something else that will potentially affect San Pablo, but we wanted to kind of give the council context and note the distinction between our efforts and this effort, because this is really a transportation effort across San Pablo Avenue in multiple jurisdictions that's looking specifically at the quality of trips for all users and promoting equitable transportation on the avenue. I won't go too much into priority development areas since that report will follow this SB2 report, but that is looking, it's an effort by ABAG that looks at the regional planning of infill locations for housing and job growth. And then our effort truly is a local land use effort that is seeking to modify our local development standards. So really the biggest difference is this effort is completely within our local control, and we have the ability to kind of shape it as appropriate. And so with that, we really are looking tonight for direction on the geographic scope. So that, again, is either housing element sites or the corridor in its entirety, and then ultimately what type of planning document you want to see prepared, whether that be code amendments or everything bundled into a broader specific plan.
I have a question. Now, in our packet, the staff did not come forward with a recommendation. It's just seeking guidance. Has there been any change? I mean, as we have come up to this date of this hearing, do you have a, I guess I'd say this, being a non-planner, I look to your planning expertise. I'd like to know what combination of scope and plan level will do the most to facilitate the kind of development that we're looking for at the lowest cost. Well, I'll make a comment that I do have concerns. On a number of occasions, we've created plans that just never went into effect, and I want to not spend money on plans that might become outdated before they are implemented. And so do you have any thoughts to share with us about that balance between
Yes.
what's most likely to facilitate the development we want at the
Right.
lowest cost?
So I think looking at the corridor in its entirety ultimately gives us the most bang for our buck.
Yes.
And yeah, the other thing that's really beneficial for us is that once this process concludes, we will be getting our regional housing needs allocation number in January of 2021. With these code amendments, we have greater potential for increased housing capacity, which will help us when we go through our next housing element update.
And does that speak at all to the desirability of a specific, of an actual specific plan versus a less formal corridor plan or a general plan amendment in terms of the type of planning document to be prepared? Is there a recommendation with regard to that?
Well, I mean, we can kind of go either way on this. Ultimately, if you pursued the scope that is before you, that has been prepared by the consultants, that all gets adopted and put into our zoning ordinance, the big green book. If we go down the path of a specific plan, we effectively take that content and the other efforts, and it becomes a separate document that a prospective developer could peruse through. It's another way of conveying the same information, but in a kind of a more consolidated form.
But that could be a second step if we don't
Yes.
want to risk creating a plan that isn't implemented.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the council? Anyone?
Yeah, I guess one that I'm not quite seeing. If we were to go this specific plan route, this is going to add 4 months onto the timing. Is this because that whole infrastructure plan is something that takes 4 months longer than the whole process, or is it something you have to do after you finish the first part of it?
It's the latter. You have to, once you have all of the draft work completed, all of that has to be analyzed by a civil engineer, and then that goes back with the original document for formal action.
Okay, so
it becomes-
it isn't something you can do concurrently with the other parts of...
That's right. It has to be done after the code amendments are prepared.
I think I asked you this when we had a meeting earlier, but the more that we can do up front in terms of the specific plan or infrastructure plans, the less a potential developer would need to do in terms of CEQA work and other things in order to actually get a housing project going. So it would actually could make the difference between something actually happening on San Pablo Avenue housing-wise and something that might drag on for years and may or may not happen. So it's basically pre-setting the table for people that want to come in and build some kind of multifamily housing. Other cities have done this. Oakland, I believe, has done this in a bunch of different areas, and they're being quite successful in terms of actual housing production.
Other cities have done what exactly?
The more upfront work you can do, closer to that specific plan idea, the more that's sort of, done. So when a developer comes, he doesn't have to go through all these steps. A lot of this is just laid out for them to plug into.
I think Vice Mayor McQuaid has a question.
Does a specific plan fit better with what ACTC is trying to do with San Pablo Avenue? Would that make a difference if we had a specific plan or a corridor plan?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because for two reasons. Their effort is really moving separately from any efforts that we would undertake, and theirs focuses specifically on transportation infrastructure, whereas ours is really controlling our built environment.
Okay.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask kind of a follow-up on that. As you've mentioned, there's a lot of agencies who have great plans for San Pablo Avenue, and the question is always sort of, who's coordinating this? Because it does seem to me that if our main transportation corridor changes to rapid bus system or with bike lanes on either side, that's a big infrastructure change in terms of the way that street's laid out, and it may in fact have implications for what kind of housing or how we, access that housing that goes along that. So who coordinates all that? Or is that even can you coordinate that in advance?
Well, I mean, we certainly have a relationship with ACTC. I guess where I kind of think of them as slightly separate is that we're looking at everything that's within private property lines, and they're looking at everything within the public realm.
Right.
And that's, in my mind, that kind of, that sort of distinguishes, what we're doing versus what they're doing. We have a relationship with them. We can coordinate and better understand what.
So we're not having to figure out whether that rapid bus system is going in, because that's a big system that might go from Pinole down to Oakland. Right. However, if we're part of that system and that system does go in, that definitely affects us, and it is going to affect what kind of infrastructure we need or what kind of housing we can build. Certainly there'd be, I suspect, more pressures to build larger housing developments by either MTC or the state or other agencies that have power over that. So even though we may not have much control over it, somehow that needs to somehow match up. Kind of a comment and question simultaneously there.
Okay. Councilmember Barnes?
Comments for later, but two quick questions. First one is the obvious one. CEQA is a process that the state imposes on us. What we've just discussed has nothing to do with the state or CEQA.
Well, we actually, I didn't go into great detail on this, but we do actually have a CEQA scope of work for the effort that we're undertaking. So we do have to do some CEQA analysis as part of our general plan and zoning ordinance.
Right, for the general plan, but vis-a-vis whether or not we bundle this all together and pay $60,000 out of our own pocket or not, what does that have to do with CEQA?
So in other words, just to make sure I'm clear on the
there's two options. We bundle this all together and call it a specific plan, or we don't. But we still have to do the RENA analysis and the general plan update, all that stuff. But it's a matter of just how tightly packaged we want to do it. So are there CEQA implications to doing one over the other?
I don't think so, because we're going to be doing CEQA regardless, and so I think with the initial effort of the CEQA analysis that we do have, it would probably cover us if we proceeded with a specific plan.
Okay, so here's a hypothetical, and you can stop if this is going to take you more than 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Okay. Let us say hypothetically someplace on the north end of San Pablo Avenue where those auto shops are, which would be on the west side, south of El Cerrito Plaza, a property becomes available and it's suitable for an 8-plex multifamily housing project. Okay? Maybe with some adjustment in the height limit. Okay, so walk me through, let's say scenario 1 is we do the low-cost option, and scenario number 2 is we bundle everything up and pay way more money, and we have a specific plan. So I'm the project manager, or however that works for the developer. I come to the gate, to the desk at City Hall, right there, and so walk me through what would be different for a competent, planning and a director for a developer between these two options.
With respect to CEQA, you'd be in the same boat under either scenario, because that first scope of work lays the groundwork to kind of have a more streamlined development process. So in terms of CEQA, it would be the same in either scenario.
I'm the project manager for a development company. Is it going to really matter to me whether over there at the desk someone hands me a big fat document or someone says, oh, here's 2 documents and here's where you look up this and here's where you look up that?
If you're an experienced developer, and a lot of developers are, they come in kind of knowing what risks they're taking. They will have looked through the zoning ordinance to understand what the development standards and restrictions are.
Okay, I think we're ready to open this up to public comment. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes. Aaron Priven.
Thank you. I'm Aaron Priven. I live on Standage Avenue. I'm here to support the proposal to create a specific plan on San Pablo Avenue. Albany's long had a goal of creating a pedestrian, human-scale environment on San Pablo, and updating land use planning on the blocks facing the avenue is an important step in accomplishing that. Creating a specific plan in addition would ease making the changes a reality by front-loading that infrastructure preparation and presenting that information clearly to developers, some of whom may not be aware of these issues if we're not publicizing that information to them. I would urge the city to adopt a very broad geographic scope for the plan. The staff report refers to the existing San Pablo zoning overlays and the previously identified housing opportunity sites, but both of those exclude such underutilized parcels as the Beverages and More site, any of the gas station sites, and a large number of low-intensity automotive service uses. Any of all of these could potentially be any good housing sites and should be studied. Any one-story building or parking lot on San Pablo Avenue represents an underutilization of precious space. Moreover, the study should not be limited to the parcels directly fronting the avenue, but should include all the parcels on those blocks, including the R3 parcels facing Keynes and Adams. This would give those parcels the best chance of being used for high-intensity residential, which is what they're already zoned for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any others? Anyone in the audience? Sir?
Hi, good evening. Ian McLeod again, Planning and Zoning Commission. I would support looking at a specific plan. I think it does front-load the process in an effective way to make future development easier for a developer that comes along. I think we have to undertake a number of other ideas with this study, with this framework, and part of it is creating equitable, transit-oriented development. And that goes along with active transportation improvements along the San Pablo corridor. Other things to consider: removing the FAR, floor area ratio for this district, removing minimum parking requirements, creating bike and active transportation storage facilities, and also making it truly affordable with a large percentage of very low income affordable units. I think that's a comprehensive idea. I agree with Mr. Maris earlier. It's a real good opportunity. I think we have to increase the height limits, 5 stories, 6 stories. Berkeley's doing the same. El Cerrito's doing very tall buildings. It's the way to get the density. It's a way to get the housing. Housing is an environmental issue in the sense that people are not living way far out and commuting, creating greenhouse gases, destroying the environment, wasting their time in their car. It's not a very livable solution. This is our opportunity to create a very livable, high-density corridor. Lots of housing, better amenities, restaurants, shops, you name it. It should be retail, first floor, housing above. I think eliminating parking, it makes units more affordable. It makes more units possible. It's a tremendous way to improve the project's feasibility as well. And if we have a transit-oriented corridor along San Pablo with bike lane, protected bike lanes, access to BART, bus rapid transit, people won't need their cars. And that's, in my vision, the way to go. That's the future. That's how we get out of this climate crisis we're in. I would support doing the infrastructure or the utility infrastructure plan. I think we should figure this all out in advance and not try to figure it out after the fact. That's all. Thank you very much.
Mr. McCroskey?
Thank you, Ken McCroskey. I support the previous 2 speakers, and I think that a specific plan should be addressed, which takes into consideration all of the area between Canes and Adams along San Pablo Avenue. And I'll second the need for affordable housing. I recently went through an addition on my house and was dismayed to learn that 95% of the people who were working on my house, including 10 to 12 subcontractors, by the way, this addition was under $100,000, so I don't have to repair my sidewalk. 95% of the people who worked on my house were coming in from the Central Valley every day. All the trades. I would rather pay local people, but they were not available. So let's look at providing some housing in Albany. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to the council. This is not a motion, but it's direction. Does anybody want to take a whack at formulating direction for the staff?
Well, I can take a whack at it. I don't know if it'll make any sense. I think we all have different ideas. My ideas that I think we would be at this juncture wiser to go for the larger idea, the specific, it's hard to say larger specific, but anyway, the idea of a specific plan that will make it, I think, easier for development of some of the housing that we need, and conceivably some of the dealings that we're going to have over our rhino totals and other things that seems to, the pressures that are coming down from the state. So it would make sense to me. I think that extra $60,000 for the infrastructure study, I wish we didn't have to spend that, but I think that's a small price to pay on the long run. I don't know. That's my 2 cents. I'm hoping the other my fellow council members feel somewhat similar.
Shall I go? So you've seen my email. I sent the council and some staff members email about the success of El Cerrito's efforts, and El Cerrito did a specific plan, and they did quite a bold specific plan. I'm not sure all the council members understand that not only did they do some of the things we're talking about, but they did form-based zoning, which, as I understand, means that they specified height limits, they specified building envelopes, and then the message to developers is, as long as you're within these limits, go to town, come and build. And the bar is very low for developers. And that's not to say you eliminate all the bars. You have design, you review, you make sure that ugly stuff doesn't get built. But El Cerrito's done a specific plan. Berkeley has done multiple specific plans over the years. I don't see how Albany could get by without doing something bold. I think we've been, if you look at San Pablo Avenue, we're just stuck with very little action over the years. We had one big development, but it was nothing of our doing. We had it was all about UC needing more revenue for the land they had, and so they pushed a big development. But what have we gotten so far? Very little over the past 10, 20 years, as far as I can tell. And even though we relaxed parking requirements, we got a interest in an application, I'm not even sure that application is submitted, for a small apartment building and some townhouses behind house. And I think we need to go bold. I think we need to go big and bold. I think we're way behind the times. I think we all want housing production. I think we need to, I think we need to think about the subtlety of what you can do in a specific plan. It's not, I don't think it's just about consolidating things in a document and making that easier. I think there's bolder things you can do in a specific plan, and I just like the form-based code, and we ought to go there. And to me, $60K is not a lot when you consider the investment in the city, when you consider doing something for the long term. And I'm terrible at analogies, but here's my analogy for doing without not going to the specific plan. It's like building a car, and you realize, well, the windows, actually you don't need the windows. They don't actually go towards the functioning of the car. So let's leave out the windows. Let's build the car without the windows. And then you run the car and you realize it's kind of windy in the car. You're not going to get very far. So I don't think it would be wise to not go the full, to do the full Monty, as it were, and do the specific plan. I think one of the important things that one of the things that staff and I know council members are concerned about is doing something bold, because we have people in the past who have spoken up about height limits, who are concerned about height limits and heights on San Pablo and density and development on San Pablo. And so, but I guarantee you, the city is behind this. The residents of this city are behind doing something bold. When I've walked door to door, and I'm repeating myself, I think I've said this in other public meetings, when I've walked door to door, knocking on people's doors, and I say the tenets of my platform is to redevelop San Pablo Avenue, I get enthusiastic nods every single time. A lot of support for that. So what I guarantee is that if we don't do good public outreach to the whole city, I guarantee if we do public outreach to the whole city, we'll get support. I guarantee if we don't do that and we keep something like this inside council meetings, we'll get a few loud voices coming to talk about how they don't like big buildings on San Pablo. So a model for this is Saha's. Saha is a private development, but you should look at them as a model for doing big public meetings in the community center, bringing out the whole community so we can get a sense for how the whole community feels. And I think you get a positive sense when you do that. That's the sense that I get from attending those meetings. So the devil's in the details. I think we need to be bold, and I think we need to do this right with lots of public outreach. And I think it's time for a specific plan. We're way behind.
Any other council comments or questions?
Well, I'll just jump in and say that it seems like what we've been doing, while we've hoped and wished that we had more development, we really haven't had any. So maybe it is time to do something different, and the specific plan may be the way to go. So I would support that. It is, a sizable amount of money, but it's not unsurmountable. And I'm not quite sure how this fits in, but I definitely want to increase height limits and density in those areas. And I don't know if that becomes part of the specific plan or how that exactly works, but I think that's at least one of the steps that we need to be taking.
Councilmember Barnes?
Well, I found all these comments interesting, but I'm sorry, a lot of these were really irrelevant to the topic at hand here. We have what is a fairly specific technical question to resolve. And the $60,000, and someone can correct me from staff if I'm wrong, is fundamentally the cost of getting some sort of engineer to merge two documents together. And it's going to cost us $60,000. The issue of height limits, for example, these other planning issues, those would go into the general plan regardless. Is that correct? So this has nothing to do with big dreams, housing, height limits. This is kind of a narrow technical issue about we can create a single package, but it's going to require under law that we hire an engineer to do it, and it's going to cost us out of our own pocket $60,000. And to me, it's not worth it. I don't really see the point. Any competent project manager can do this. It's not going to make a difference to them. So this is feel-good stuff, and we already waste too much money on feel-good stuff in this town, in my opinion. So I don't, favor creating a specific plan.
Well, my own comment, on the one hand, I do agree with Councilmember Pilch about the importance of trying to get the right kind of development, and I agree with Councilmember Barnes that that's not really what this is about. This is a fairly technical planning question of whether we do a corridor plan without the infrastructure aspect of it and leave that for another phase, or whether we go ahead and do it right now. And I'm hearing that a consensus is forming that we go ahead and do it. My question is there that the $60,000 would be, we would be seeking grant funding that would encompass that as well, or is that $60,000 that would come from discretionary general funds?
We would have to budget for it as part of the general fund, so it would come out of the city's expenses.
Okay. Does that change anyone's thinking on the on going forward versus phasing?
I don't think so. I think it's, considering the city's budget, it's a relatively small amount, and this is the time, and in these good economic times, is the time to take that one-time dip in the pot and use that money so that when property tax revenues fall, for example, we don't, we're not missing that. We'll have spent it, but we don't have to spend it again. I think it's well worth the investment.
Okay, and others feel the same. Do you have further?
Well, there's actually two issues, and I realize I didn't make any statements on the other issue. Is that do we want a consistent plan from border to border along San Pablo Avenue? And having walked that section of San Pablo quite a bit on Blue Glove Crew, my feeling is that yes, we should have just one set of standards from McDonald's up to El Cerrito Plaza, basically. It all looks the same to me after a while, so I think there doesn't need to be any specificity in the plan regarding that.
Okay, well, I hear a consensus coming together that that the geographic scope be the entire stretch, and that we go forward with a specific plan, even if we do need to take funding from other priorities. And the one thing is, I hope that we would make an effort to find grant funding for the infrastructure portion if we possibly can, because we say, well, it's only $60,000, but that's quite a bit of money for a small city. So let's roll. And I also just want to say, I think I'm hearing a lot of consensus about the substance, and we will come back and talk about the planning substance on another day. Thank you. Is that okay with everyone? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Staff feels like they've gotten the sense of direction.
Yeah, we have what we need, and so we'll adjust the application accordingly, go for one more peer review, and send it off to the state in the next couple weeks.
Thank you. Okay, then we move on to our next item of unfinished business, and this is the Association of Bay Area Governments and Metropolitan Transportation Committee Priority Development Area Update. Could we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. This is a continuation of a discussion that you had late at your meeting in July. And so I'll go through a quick summary of the discussion in July and then seek your guidance. As part of SB 35, which was legislation passed in 2008, regional planning agencies such as ABAG and MTC are now required to prepare a regional plan that integrates demographic and economic projections with regional transportation planning and housing planning. In the Bay Area, this is called Plan Bay Area. In 2007, as part of the regional planning process, at that time, ABAG established the PDA and PCA program, the Priority Development Area and Priority Conservation Area program. The intent at that time was for cities to self-identify areas of communities, plan for more housing, and that these areas would be, have improved eligibility for regional grant programs. And several years later, in 2011, the City Council approved the submittal of an application for a PDA incorporating San Pablo Avenue, Solano Avenue corridors. In addition, Albany Hill has been established as a priority conservation area. Earlier this year, ABAG MTC adopted revisions to the PDA program criteria, and PDAs are now defined as infill locations planned for housing and job growth. Within PDAs, a variety of mobility options should be available, and they should promote opportunities for people of all incomes. On the screen is a graphic that shows the status of PDAs in the Bay Area. There's a total of 188 PDAs, and 85 of those require some form of amendment. So our PDA it would fall into the gold color category there, where we have the transit to serve our PDA, but there is some planning work that we need to do. And your previous action just moments ago really sets the framework for that planning action. To meet the planning criteria, we have until the year 2025 to adopt a specific plan and anything else that we want to attach to that specific plan that would help facilitate housing growth and employment growth as well in transit supportive densities. And again, as you discussed moments ago, as part of that, we would do a CEQA review that would help facilitate development consistent with the new plan. So the process that we're faced with in the near future is that ABAG has asked city staff to write a letter, and a template for that letter is in your packet, to ABAG by September 16th, indicating an intent to amend our EDA to bring it into compliance with the new criteria. Although it's not required, we would like to bring back to City Council by January of next year a resolution affirming that letter of intent that we can prepare based on your direction this evening. Next, I want to show you a timeline that kind of ties all these different things together, because there are a lot of balls in the air here, so to speak, with the planning process that we're embarking on, and lots of acronyms, and I thought it'd be worth a moment just so you understand the context of all this. Starting on the left part of the screen, we're at this point where we need to submit a letter of intent, and as you just took action on, we'll have shortly funds to do the SB2 planning. This is work that we would start this year and try to complete at least the first phase, and this graphic was prepared before we knew what you were going to take action on a few minutes ago. So we would expect, if it's a specific plan, it will probably roll into the year 2021, the preparation of the specific plan, using primarily the SB2 planning grant funds, but also some of our local funds, unless we can get additional grant funds. Beginning also in 2020 and rolling into 2021 is the region-wide planning for housing needs in the Bay Area, and the acronym RHNA, RHNA, which is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, is a process of assigning to each city in the Bay Area the number of housing units that we have to plan for. And in the past, right now, our target number that was given to us several years ago is 335 units over a 5-year period. We expect that number probably to double. That's a little bit of a wild guess, but every indication is it's going to increase significantly. So we'll have a very significant planning process that we'll have to go through once we receive that RHNA allocation number. And that planning process will be preparing a new housing element, and that will begin in 2021. And probably go towards the end of 2022. It's required to be submitted to the state early in January of 2023. All this ties back into the item that's before you, which is what are we going to do and what kind of amendments do we want to make to our PDA? If we express a letter of intent, what do we want to have happen? And my recommendation for the moment is let's let these other planning processes play out, and then because we have quite a large window of time, we have till 2025 to make the PDA amendments. Let's do the SB2 planning, let's do a housing element, and then we'll go back and look at our PDA and bring the PDA into compliance with the other, frankly, more important planning processes that we will be doing in the interim. So I hope that makes some sense of how all this works together. And the action we need tonight is just, again, some general direction. Are you comfortable with staff submitting a letter of intent, knowing that you'll have a chance to affirm that in the next few months as we learn more. The information about all this planning is rolling out. Every few weeks we get more information and new insights. So probably by the time we're back in, say, November or December, we'll have more detail about how this is all shaping out and how the PDAs fit in with regional planning. And that by that time, we also hope to be gearing up for the real work of the SB2 planning that you just took action on. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the council? Questions? No? No questions from the council. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes. Aaron Pruvin.
Thank you. Again, I'm Aaron Privin. I'd like to ask the city to go ahead and send a letter indicating the intent to maintain the PDA designation for at least the current PDA locations, if not adding more, like the higher intensity residential areas near El Cerrito Plaza. Moreover, the staff report talks about Solano Avenue. I'd like to encourage you to maintain the PDA designation for areas along Solano Avenue. Even if Berkeley does not indicate that these are development areas, the areas on Solano and Albany, most convenient to San Pablo Avenue and the BART access along the Ohlone Greenway, are better candidates for development than the areas in Berkeley's jurisdiction. Albany should maintain them as priority development areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Anyone in the audience? Okay, then I'll bring it back to council. Once again, I asked, does anybody want to take a whack at direction to the staff on PDAs?
Do you need this in the form of a motion?
It's up to you. Whatever you're comfortable with in terms of giving direction. I would, generally speaking, I think if there's a consensus, we don't need anything, but if you're split on what to do, probably some sort of motion would help clarify the direction you'd like us to go.
Well, my desire is for you just to use your best judgment. I think this is largely a bureaucratic process, and it will play out over several years, so just go with the flow.
I also support the staff's good judgment. I would say I do have a concern, although I certainly do support the idea of more housing as well as more retail along Solano Avenue. I believe it's important that it be done with enormous care, and also that it be done with some level of collaboration and coordination with Berkeley, especially the stretches where Solano is Albany on one side of the street and is Berkeley on the other. It concerns me that we would have different planning regimes for two sides of Solano. But I also think that we should explore expanding the PDA for residential to more areas, that there may be areas where we have underutilized space, and we have existing housing that is low density that could be replaced by higher density appropriately, and that we consider that, both of those issues going forward. But as with Councilmember Barnes, I'm comfortable relying on the staff's good judgment and consultation with the council going forward. Councilmember Pilch?
Sure, I think I can agree with everything the mayor just said, and happy to have the staff submit the letter. I think I would like it, that the letter come back to council just as an informational item, so we can know, so we can view what was said. I also, and we've talked about this a little bit as well, if it makes it a stronger case for us to have a council resolution, then I would love to approve a council resolution as well. But I understand that is not necessary. So if staff thinks it makes a stronger case, if we're more likely to get a benefit out of that, then we can do that. And what was the final thing I was going to say? It was that, yes, it seems like kind of a slam dunk that you can now put all these things into the PDA to say that council has affirmed direction for a specific plan, council is doing this, doing that, and it seems like we'll be in good shape for making a case that we are really going to make substantial changes to our PDA.
And I don't want to minimize the importance of designating a PDA. I think that over the longer run, the PDAs will be subject to more stringent requirements from the state and from MTC. And I do want us to be careful about, on the one hand, pursuing our goals for more and better development, and on the other hand, taking great care with resources that have been particularly successful and should not be lost. Anything else?
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable in this situation, given there's a number of unknowns out there, letting staff, see how the cards are coming down before we get too committed one way or another. I do agree with the statement that was made in public comment about, so I wouldn't pull Solano Avenue out of PDA so quickly just because Berkeley isn't doing it. I think, as I recall at one point in one of our, in some of the stuff we were looking at, that the PDAs had to be of a certain size in order to be determined PDAs, and part of the reason that Solano Avenue was included was because San Pablo Avenue on its own wasn't large enough to make a formal PDA. I don't know if there's still that kind of size requirement, but I would also say I think there are other areas that are currently R3 that might be considered to be something we might want to add to a future PDA, going forward. It does seem like there's a lot of balls in the air that you guys are juggling, and that all the cities are juggling between all these different corridor plans and specific plans and PDA plans. I hope you can sort of keep us abreast of what's, what the latest developments are as time goes on. When I look at that timeline, the end of it, none of us will be sitting up at this dais. This is going to be, the final adjustments are going to be made by a future council. the more information you can put out as to, how these things went along and how we got to where we're at, I think it'll be easier on those future council people to be able to pass, or perhaps not pass, but at least understand what the process has been.
Okay, is that enough? I mean, are you hearing a?
It's excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is everyone comfortable? Okay. Then let's move on to new business, item 12-1, designation of Memorial Park, Section B, as a dog park. Staff.
Yeah, apologies, Mayor, for the interruption, but I have been. It's been suggested, or it's been recommended by staff that I recuse myself from this item due to my proximity of my residence to Memorial Park and to this section, and due to the fact that I just arrived back from Seattle today, and I have a full workday tomorrow, and there's no more substantial items on the agenda, I will remove myself from the meeting as well.
We will make sure that item 13, we make note of your request that the cannabis policy be revisited.
I appreciate that very much. So good night to you all.
Good night. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to bring this item to you. The item before the Council is a recommendation from the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission to designate Memorial Park Section B as an official dog park in Albany, and to maintain the current hours of operation, develop a detailed plan for some minor improvements to the area, and continue to explore additional locations for a dog park in Albany. I want to give you a brief summary. You have some details in the history of Section B. It is long, but I want to get right to the subcommittee who is joining me tonight. I have Commissioners Martin, Abbott, and Chang Frank, who will make a presentation of their process and their findings and recommendation. Section B is on the northeast corner of Memorial Park. It's Thousand Oaks and Carmel, and it was established in 2001 when City Council approved a recommendation from the Parks, Recreation, Open Space Commission to install a fence basically along the first base line. This created two separate areas, Section A, which was the ball field, and Section B, which was a fenced-in, square, grassy, beautiful area that was supposed to be intended to be multi-use and allow for concurrent use of the space between the sports users and general population. Almost immediately after it was opened, Section B became a very popular spot for people to exercise their dogs. And with this increased activity, it prompted calls for dog park amenities from dog users and complaints by the neighbors about noise and parking and poor conduct by some of the users of Section B. But really, since its formation, it's been primarily used as a dog play area, and not by any other user group. In 2012, in preparation for an item to come to council, staff at the time coordinated with the Community Development Department to do a secret review in the area when we were changing the hours of operation, and that conclusion was that the dog park qualified for an exemption from further secret review. Over the past 7 years, staff and commission and council have really received and heard all of the different sides of this issue on Section B and have taken steps to address neighbors' concerns, such as limiting the hours of operation, put-it-up rule sign, time gates, and limiting the number of amenities. This has been an emotionally charged topic at times, and both sides still to this date had not been happy. The commission wanted to take a deeper look into the topic and requested a work plan amendment from the council to investigate whether even a dog park is necessary, and if it is, what would be an appropriate space for that dog park. The council approved the commission moving forward, and a subcommittee was formed to look at this issue. And over the course of the year, this subcommittee brought back information to the full commission on 6 different meetings. They've held community workshops and done a great deal of community outreach. I commend that leadership that they took that on. It's a very emotional issue, and they did some very personal touches and really wanted to make sure that neighbors of Section B, their voices were heard. They performed some in-person interviews and really wanted to get the feeling from the people that lived around that area. And just a couple notes on community outreach. Every time the item for Section B appeared on a commission agenda. That was sent out to all of the email notification lists in a special category that we have set up for dogs in Albany, which totals over almost 400 people on those lists, and also the participation lists that were formed from the improved community engagement. And for this public meeting, we did a larger than 500 household radius. We actually ended up sending it to 179 households that are near Section B, and did some extensive outreach to those mailing lists and other lists that we have. I also want to note that anytime that item, a Section B item, would appear on a commission agenda, I sent a personal email to the neighbors of Section B to make sure that they were informed, and that was passed on to the group of people on their email list. And so that's just a basic background. I want to get to the subcommittee. They're here tonight to present to you and talk through the details of their process and the data and findings and the reasons for their recommendations. So.
Thank you. My name, again, is Julie Chang-Frank. I'm a Parks, Recreation, Open Space Commissioner, and my fellow commissioners and I are here to just present the results of that public outreach that Shelley mentioned. I'm just going to, oh, is it in present mode? Is that, oh, this is a PDF. Yes. All right. So I should just do it by, okay. So, sorry, okay. So just to give you a brief outline of the timeline, so recognizing that this is a very contentious issue, we wanted to make sure we did a full and robust public engagement process. So over the past year, just a quick timeline, we're going to go into the details in this presentation. We first started looking at Section B, Memorial Park Section B, and interviewing both the neighbors and the users, because that's the closest thing we do have to a dog park. We also did a general citywide online survey. Then we followed that up with a dog park community workshop, which we held here and had a good public discussion. We reported the findings of that engagement to our commission, and we're here obviously today to present the results of that work. Just to let you know what Shelley mentioned in terms of notifying, every time we did any kind of outreach, we asked people if they want to be notified about subsequent meetings, and so they were always informed by email, and we also told them about the sort of road ahead for other opportunities for public comment. Just some other additional information we considered. We talked obviously with the Parks and Recreation staff to find out the history of the area. We interviewed Police Chief Geisberger, and we also received information unsolicited from like a petition from Section B users indicating their support of the dog usage area, emails from Section B neighbors over time to Parks and Recreation staff, a petition for a small dog park, and then also comments from next door. Again, just to orient folks to where Memorial Park is, the pictures of the left shows that. And then also Section B in particular is in that northeast corner of Thousand Oaks and Carmel Avenue. Okay, so to talk first about the Memorial Park Section B outreach. What we did there was we really wanted to hear from the neighbors about what their issues, concerns, et cetera, were. So what we did is we actually, if you look at the yellow, so those are the sort of, that's actually not a totally representative arrow of who we touched. We probably did a little bit less than all of Thousand Oaks Boulevard, a little bit less than the San Carlos, which is the outer yellow line. But what we were doing was we were trying to reach those 500 houses close to Section B to really understand what their concerns were. The way we did that was we first distributed door hanger notifications to say, hey, we're going to come speak with you. Then my fellow dog park subcommittee members and I actually went door to door on the weekends, knocked on the doors of each one of those homes to say, hey, remember we notified you they were coming by, can you take the survey? If people weren't home, we actually followed up with the second visit the following weekend, knocked on the door again, and if they weren't home that second time, then we left a note, another written notification, or another door hanger saying, hey, we stopped by, we couldn't reach you, but you can email us here, or you can fill out this online survey with the questions that we have. Through that very deep, intensive engagement, we actually got a 60% response rate. So we reached 26 of the 43 homes in that 500 feet radius near Section B. What we found were that there was a predominantly positive view of how Section B is being used. So the question was, how do you feel about Memorial Park Section B as a dog usage area? 62%, 16 of those 23 households said they viewed it very positively. 5 of the 23, which is 19%, had neutral, no comment, didn't really, no comment. And then 5 to 23 households were negative. And just to give you an idea, these were not multiple choice. They were actually conversations that we have with folks. So some of those comments, just some of the summary statements of people's views were, for the positive, for example, we're wonderful, great community. Another one was, we wish it were open earlier, we're big users. Another neighbor commented, good, our kids like to see the dogs go by our house. And just to characterize some of the negative comments, one neighbor said the worst impacts are parking and traffic. Another said it's a too small of an area for dogs, it's an inappropriate size for dog park. Actually, a couple neighbors said that. And then another said, I'm very opposed, dogs fight every day and people argue about their dogs. So we just want to, try to let you all know that this was a summary of what we understood their views to be, but the counts in terms of representation of the numbers were what you see here. And in terms of the proximity to Section B, some who faced Section B directly were positive, and some were negative. So there was a mix for sure. The other slide, or the other question we asked is, do you yourself use Section B or a dog park with or without a pet? And we found 44% said yes, or I will soon. 56% said no. But even though that was the breakdown, there was a majority that was still supportive of Section B as a dog usage area. One neighbor said that she actually moved to the neighborhood because of the Section B, to be able to use Section B with her dog. Let's see. So the other question is, do you think Section B users are respectful of the rules? So this was one of the issues I think that's been a concern over time of lack of enforcement of the hours per se, or excessive barking. And so 2 of the 26 households said that Section B users didn't respect the rules. Several actually noticed that there was a difference, that's gotten better over time, and they attributed that to the timed gate that was installed a few years ago. And then finally, when we interviewed Police Chief Geisberger, he had told us that he's been with the department for years, as you may know, but he said that there used to be frequent calls for Section B violation of the rules, but since the time gate was installed, it's really very minimal. And now he just doesn't see it as being an issue anymore. When we asked him how he'd feel about Section B being designated a dog park, he said, I already think of it as a dog park. So. Memorial Park Section B neighborhood survey results. So in terms of, we also wanted to know how could this area be improved for you? And so we said, do you have any suggestions for how it can work better with your neighborhood? The 3 themes that emerged were aesthetics, amenities for dogs and dog owners, and signage and enforcement of the rules. So in terms of aesthetics, some of the comments there were, the chain link fence is ugly. There's also a tarp that kind of separates along the fence that some noted wasn't attractive. There's sometimes bowls of water strewn along the side, and there's plastic bags tied on the fence. Another commented that trees would be helpful. In terms of amenities for dogs and dog owners, and again, several neighbors do actually use Section B themselves, so many actually said water for dogs would be helpful. Others noted a double door, so the dogs would be less likely to get out, and then benches so people don't bring their own lawn furniture. Sometimes people bring it in just to have a place to sit. And then finally, in signage and enforcement of rules, obviously to reduce noise and try to curb dogs barking excessively. There was still some people who noted that people violate the hours in the evening. We think this happens in the summertime when it's just late, and so they don't realize that it's after 8 o'clock. But then one neighbor suggested maybe having the sprinklers turn on automatically to enforce the rules. So we thought that was an interesting, creative solution. Finally, turning our attention now to Section B users. These are the people who actually use Section B. We also did an extensive outreach there of a different form. These were more multiple choice surveys, paper surveys that we handed out in clipboards. The 3 of us went on different times of the day. And what we noticed were that there were groups that regularly congregate in the noon, afternoon, evenings, weekdays, weekends. So we tried to hit those various groups. And I think we were really successful because we received 107 surveys completed. Some of the questions we asked is, how often do you use Section B? Huge percentage uses Section B actually more than once a week, very frequent when it's open. How far do you travel? Many within a few blocks, and the great majority within 1 mile away. And then why do you use Section B, or what's a key reason? Location was definitely the most cited reason for why they use Section B. And then just to, just in terms of other comments, we heard from that group that location and convenience was really important. Community and community connectedness was something that they really valued about that area, and that they consider that area to have better behaved dogs and friendlier owners than other dog areas. And just to quote one of the users, they said, "Dogs are friendlier, owners are respectful. I've met people here and have friends nearby. We frequently go to dinner on Solano Avenue after meeting at Section B." And now I'm going to turn it over to Todd about the general dog park survey.
Thank you, Julie. Julie didn't mention that of the 107 responses, I think she did like 80 of them. She went for the high populated times. I went in the afternoon, there were like 5 people. Anyway, so after we talked about Section B, we wanted to get more, I'm sorry, Todd Abbott, Parks and Rec Commissioner, there we go. We wanted to get more of the general response. Again, remember our charge is to find out, does Albany need a dog park and what sort of facilities do they need? So we wanted to ask more broadly. So now we sent out a general survey asking these 3 questions. Is there a need for additional dog facilities in Albany? What features might be most important in such a facility? And what might be a good location? This was open to everybody. It was strictly online. We didn't do any in-person surveys with this one. We publicized it where Shelley put it on the e-news and things like that, sent out the email list. And then we put signs up at popular places for dog users, Memorial Park, Terrace Park, and the Bulb. We received 260 responses, a pretty good response, and it's about a 3-week period that it was open, so I consider that quite successful. Of those, 235 of them own or walk a dog, and 25 do not. So I'm just going to want to talk about this first question, this first slide, because it really does directly ask that first question. Is there a need or desire for additional facilities for dogs in Albany? And again, these are dog users. So what we're asking here is, if we built something else, would they come, right? Would there be demand? And it does appear there is demand. 53% of the folks who responded did say there would be a need. Now remember, these are people who already have a place to take their dog. We didn't have a way to reach the people who don't have a place to take their dog. So there might be more demand there. But we do think that there's some indication, at least significant indication, that there'd be demand. Then we asked about features. So that you can see here, wasn't sure how large they were going to be. I don't know if you can see that or not. But location we asked about, ground surface, we asked about the size of the area, and then fencing. As we saw with the Section B survey, location is key. People want it to be convenient. They really like to be able to walk there or get there conveniently. Easily. Ground surface, they really like grass or a natural area like the Bulb. People don't want something like concrete. We heard some comments for, but mostly against, like bark, which is common with a dog area. Size is key. Pretty much they want a largest area they can, although there is some request for a smaller area for small dogs. And then fencing, some people like fencing, some don't. I think the response here shows the impact of a large number of responses coming from the Bulb, which, obviously those folks aren't going out there for the fencing. They're going out there for the other things. All right, so then we asked about location. So this map shows kind of what we identified as the most popular current locations for running your dog off leash. Memorial Park Section Bs, we've learned about the lawn at Jules Terrace Park. The Greenway Dartmouth gets some use. And then, of course, the Albany Bulb, Neck, and Beach. I don't mention the beach here because that's not Albany, but that obviously gets a lot of appeal. So what we're looking for is a new location. Where might we put a new dog park? Now, that might be using one of these, converting one of these to a dog park, or it might be a new location, and we did some brainstorming. Shelley had a lot of input, and we came up with some possible ideas. These are just very rough ideas of possible new locations or locations for a new dog park. The one thing I'd mention is one item here is the Ocean View Park. but there's already plans. Since we started doing this, plans have been made for that, so that's kind of off the table. But there are some other alternatives. But the big question is, which of these do people prefer? If we had to choose one of these, what would they be? And you can see it's pretty even. There's no clear winner here. Because of this, even though we have some ideas for where it might be, it would really require some more effort to try to find out what the best decision would be. The public did not really have a strong feeling one way or the other, so we're having a hard time.
This is conditioned on the existing park remaining.
Yes.
You didn't ask them if the park went away, where else?
Right, we didn't ask them that. That's correct, yeah. I suspect that, well, I'm not going to speculate. So here's kind of what we took away from this general dog park survey. There is interest in additional facilities. More than 50% would like to see more facilities, and so we believe that a new facility would see use. Regarding features, we think it should probably have a grass or natural surface. It should be as large as possible, possibly an area for a small dog, and open as close to year-round as possible. That wasn't one of these questions, one of the things I presented here, but that was a significant response in the survey. And then there's no clear preference expressed for location. And I think the next is Brian.
Thank you. I'm Brian Martin, Parks and Rec Commissioner. On May 30th, we led a workshop in these chambers, and it was well attended. All sorts of notices went out, which Shelley could describe that was happening. And we presented what we'd been doing and got people up to speed about Section B and a lot of the things we've been already saying tonight. And we were looking in particular for pros and cons of continuing the conditions of off-leash dogs at Terrace Park, Albany Bulb, and the Greenway. What are people's thoughts on how that's going there for dog owners? And then pros and cons for potential dog park locations, so Memorial Park, Section B, Key Route, somewhere on Albany Greenway, open space near train tracks, under freeway, or open it up to other locations, so allowing the public to brainstorm with us there, get input, and then amenities for dog parks. So there was butcher paper for all these things, and any just general questions that they had. And so residents went around and filled out the butcher paper and voted with stickers on which ideas that resonated with them, and interacted with the commissioners and staff to get their viewpoints heard. The key takeaways that we got from that were, again, a no strong winner for a location of a second dog park. A geographically diverse second dog park was expressed, a need for that, since partly because we've seen that people value a dog park being local, and Section B isn't local. It was only local to people around Section B. An interesting quote we heard was, "My dog is my exercise machine," and so people not only value community from dog parks, but also the exercise they get moving around with their dog. People uncomfortable with off-leash dogs said they value fenced-in areas. And year-round availability was voiced. Section B was closed 123 days this past winter, so quite a lot. Desired amenities for dog park include some of the things we've heard in other feedback that we've gotten, the right kind of fencing, water availability, year-round, which may require a different surface than grass, so that's something that would need to be looked into. Signage for rules, double gates, trees for shade. And I wanted to point out that our plan, the cost should come under the $3 million that Rancho Cucamonga was able to get in the state budget from an earmark. And but if the city could work with Buffy Wicks and Nancy Skinner to try to get that kind of thing for us next year, I think we could put it to good use. And next we have, I think, Todd to close it out.
All right, so we'd heard from the public quite a bit, and we had a lot of discussion. We decided to make some recommendations. So the primary recommendation at this point is to go ahead and just kind of make official what's already casual, or that designate Memorial Park Section B as an official dog park. Now what this does is it opens up the possibility for us to provide some of the amenities the dog park folks are looking for, and also provide some of the ways to moderate the impact on the neighborhood. So here's what we're balancing. So on the one hand, we have the comments from the neighbors. They'd like to see better aesthetics. They want to see better enforcement of the hours and really do something about the noise impacts. And they feel pretty strongly they want to maintain the existing hours, and they really want the grass surface. They don't want bark or dirt over there. From the dog owners, they would like some shade. They want fencing. They would really like to have a water spigot in there, better signage for the rules. They want a kind of double gate entry system, and then year-round availability would be great. That's top of everybody's rule there. Balance these requests. These are our recommendations. Just going to run through them real quick. I'll go into detail on each one. We agree with the aesthetics point. Add some trees, maybe some other plantings, some benches. We have some ideas for reducing the noise. We think adding a double gate would help reduce the noise, and also moving the entryway to the other side of the park. Better enforcement, I think we can do a better job with the signage, and then maybe some creative rules. Maybe the sprinklers come on at 8:15 for 5 minutes. I don't know. Kind of interesting. And then we think it's fine to maintain the existing hours in the grass surface. We think that's the best option right now. So improve the aesthetics. So here, this is looking along the baseball field. We think planting a line of trees here would help the aesthetics and provide shade. We'd also have plantings on the other side of the park, shielding the neighborhood. Again, it improves the aesthetics and provides amenities. We'd like to have some benches. What I like about benches is placing the benches gives us an opportunity to kind of control where the activity is. It kind of lets us control traffic. So if we move the benches away from the houses, people will congregate away from the houses, and that's where more of the noise impacts would be. And so this is one of the bigger ideas is moving the entry. This is currently the entry, and we would move it up here. So rather than a lot of conflict right down in the corner there, where dogs are getting out, get back here, or dogs are barking at each other in excitement, that'd be moved up deeper into the park, away from the houses. We'd add the double gate so that transition is kind of softened, so there's not so much conflict anyway. Less opportunity for a dog to see a squirrel and run off down the street. It's much better controlled. And again, this is an attempt to move the action away from that corner, which is right near all the houses, on the deeper into the park, so the conversations and the shouting for the dogs happens further away. And we think you can easily, that's a nice location to easily install a double gate. We would take the double gate that's currently there and move it over by the batting cage, and that would serve as the main entrance, and then there'd be a shorter gate inside, a fence and gate inside to provide that double impact, again, to soften the transition and, again, reduce noise. Better signage. There's been quite a bit of signage, but we haven't felt that it's been really direct enough. We like something like this that just is very clear, very direct. And, apart from communicating directly, it gives people in the dog park an opportunity. They don't have to go up and say, hey, make your dog shut up. They can just walk up and point to a sign. See that sign? Yeah. So we think there's a real opportunity for better signage. So that's section B. And then we do think there's demand for an additional location. And we would request, if you agree, that you allow us to continue looking and try to identify a better location. Maybe something that fills in some of the gaps. Remember that map was a little lopsided. Or find something that's going to work better for folks. Albany doesn't have a whole lot of space. If we had open space, we'd be putting housing there, I know. So it might be hard to find a spot that's a good size, that's not big enough for housing or whatever, but that would work well for a dog park. And I think that's it. Thank you. I'm sure we're here for questions.
Okay, do we have questions for the subcommittee?
I've got a couple. Did anyone ask for an earlier opening? I know your recommendation is to keep that same time, but 11 is rather late in the day, I would say, and for people that work and have dogs, I think they'd love.
Absolutely, yeah, both earlier and later.
It was just basically
yeah.
a compromise with the neighbors who want to sleep until 11 every day and don't want.
I'm not going to make judgment about why. It's their right to wish for the hours there are. Did you have a?
Well, I would add that we did do some looking at some dog parks in neighboring communities, and you're right that some of them do open quite early at 7 or 8 in the morning. And so that's something that Albany could look at, but right now we're specifically not recommending that.
And that might be an opportunity for an additional facility. It may not be appropriate for Section B, but it might be okay in another location. Good question.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Well, yeah, I'll just say I do remember this issue, and I think it's, there are some dogs that are very active at 6 or 7 in the morning, some cats like mine, but I have an alarm cat. But I think we decided in the past that a little quiet time in the morning is a reasonable thing. Now, whether or not you can open at 10 or 11 or later or earlier in different times of the year, we went through all of that, and I don't know. So I think not having, in that space, not having pets running around, parking some, not a lot, whatever, is reasonable, because I wouldn't want to hear it at 8 o'clock in the morning either.
If I remember, when Section B was initially designated for dog use, Parks and Rec actually recommended a split period, that it would be open from like 7 to 9 and then from 6 to 9. I don't remember exactly what it was, but then it was council's decision that no, let's just have it open one big block and we'll start a little later. And I think it's been working pretty well.
Yeah, that's what we do with other parks too. I don't think we adjust our park hours. This was an issue with the bulb. Do we adjust the park hours to make it close later during the summer? And we decided, I think on advice from the police, that that was not workable. Albany is a voice command only community, so dogs aren't required to be on leashes anywhere. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. So in the other parks on the bulb, there's no leash requirements currently, right?
Voice control, but yes. And
So
there are dogs that can't do that.
Yeah. At Memorial Park now, in other sections of the park, there are dogs running around without leashes on.
I was just going to mention that in regard to your question about hours. I mean, at 6 a.m., you can probably go to the main lawn on Memorial Park and not really have any issues. But yeah, no, that's correct. Dogs can be off leash under voice command anywhere in Albany, except in Section B from 8 p.m. to 11 a.m.
Yeah.
And children's playground area.
And children's playgrounds. That's right. That's right.
Well, I have some comments, but I'll save them.
Okay. Okay. Questions?
Yeah, can you just go over again, if you move the gate, I'm not exactly sure where you're moving it to.
Yeah. So, do I need to take this?
Yes.
I saw you jumping. I could use a mouse. Yeah, this will be better. Yeah, this will be better. Yeah, this will be better. All right. So right now it's on the corner, right? So you know where it is now, correct? So this is the batting cage. Here's the snack shack.
Okay.
So the picnic area. So you walk in here, and there's that big double gate. It used to be open, and when it was open, I would come in with my dog from here, like that. But it's a big double gate, and they use it to get equipment in to maintain the field. So we can put a gate there and still have room for that. But it's up in that corner, right by the baseball fields. It's kind of, if this is, say, the Panhandle, it's right in there.
We've also gotten input from the folks that work with the ball field that they need enough room to get some equipment through here every once in a while to cut the grass and do whatever. And so, we feel there's enough room for dogs and large equipment to both use that double wide gate.
I think my only concern, and I'll try to put this in a question, is it as accessible? I'm trying to say, is it as accessible as the other spot? It's obviously not. It's quite a bit further. But will the fact that it's further be a barrier for people with mobility issues? Is it flat? Is it accessible? Is it all the other things it needs to be?
Well, it is, because the ball field has to be. So all of that has ramps and the like. So it is. And you're right, there are people who bring their dogs to the dog park in wheelchairs and end up with issues getting around. It should be. Now, it's true that, there will be crowds at the ballpark sometimes, and there'll be people in the picnic area, but there's enough ways in here that I think it can avoid conflicts. Another thing I may not have mentioned is that the Snack Shack has a drinking fountain, so that's where we have our water access. So it's a lot easier for folks to come over here and get some water for their dog than what they had to do before, which was come out here, walk all the way around, and up here to get water for their dog, or just carry it in a big bucket that is unsightly. Brian has something else to say.
Yeah, and I would add that for this gate here, the sidewalk ends before the gate. This sidewalk, as you may know, is completely ripped up and is unpassable. And so, and then this, I believe, is just dirt or something. So it's debatable how accessible this
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any cards for public comment? None. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak? Please come up. Come on up and get in line as we'll move through. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, I happen to live right across the street from the ballpark, 605 Carmel. My name is Dave Gallegos, and I have lived there for 30 years. So I remember when it was a beautiful green area and it was multi-use for children and not just dogs. And then this really started, I guess, as you said, in 2001, when that extra fence was added. And you say, well, now it's all being used by dogs because nobody brings their children there to play anymore. So you started this in 2001. It was probably a prior council, but that decision is what created the dog park. So the answer is, it is a dog park. It's not great living across the street from a dog park if you don't have dogs. As some of the council members were polling and when they were running for office, I said, it's like living across the street from a kennel. Dogs barking, lots of activity. Most of the time the ground is dirt because the dogs have torn it up, and it's not very enjoyable. It has actually ruined the view outside my house. So I would prefer you get rid of the fence and bring it back to the way it was 20 years ago. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Brian Young, 601 Carmel. I'm actually Dave's neighbor. And first I'd like to acknowledge the good work this committee has done on their survey. I don't agree with their conclusions, but I'll go into that. But I do want to acknowledge they sat in my living room and did a good job, interviewing. So have I mentioned 10 years is how long I've been coming to discuss this? Dave talked a little bit about first it was the ball field, and then it was building the perimeter fence along Carmel that in effect built a dog park. So I own a dog. I occasionally run my dog at Section B. I benefit from it, but I'm also very sensitive to the issues that it creates. And I'll come back to this, but really creating a formal dog park, an official dog park, and adding the amenities are only going to accentuate the issues. What are the issues? It's noisy. I personally am not terribly sensitive to the barking and the noise. But I have family members that are. I have neighbors that work at home, and they're deeply bothered by it. So the noise doesn't bother me too much, but the confrontation upsets me. Well, what type of confrontation? Well, most dogs are well behaved, but occasionally you'll get two dogs that get into it. It's very loud, it's barking, there's biting, but that isn't the worst of it. It's the human companions that pull them apart and then curse at one another and shout And, you know, every once in a while, including maybe 2 weeks ago, the police are called. You know, I come out and the police have a dog owner on the ground. They're sitting on him saying, you're not restraining your dog. So that's the sort of thing that we get subjected to. So it's interesting. So, and okay, 57 seconds. You guys said something tonight that never occurred to me. You said that, see, this issue is disproportionately affected the people right across the street, like Dave and I and others. You guys said that the result of your survey was mixed, that of neighbors directly across the street, you got mixed results. But you were asking them about the current use. It's not a dog park, the current informal multi-use. I've asked them, how do you feel about changing the status to a dog park? And overwhelmingly, unanimously, they're opposed. So, you know, maybe I need to do my own survey or something. But so, to be short, it's a difficult thing, it's contentious, and it disproportionately affects a small group of people who live right across the street, who, you know, deserve to live peacefully as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Stephen Vernon. I'm David's southern neighbor as opposed to Brian's being his northern neighbor. Therefore, I, of course, live right across the park. And I, too, want to really commend the committee for the work it's done. I'm really appreciative of it. However, though there are many possible candidates for this honor, I might be, as the report states, the one neighbor who is unhappy with the use of Section B as a dog area, who feels that they have been the target of aggression by some Section B users. I don't call being followed around the block while I'm walking my dog and screamed at and threatened 2 different times with, I know where you live, feeling like being a target of aggression. It is being the target of aggression. This occurred twice when I unobtrusively, out of concern for provoking hostility, an obvious appropriate concern, took pictures of people violating the ordinance and being in the park outside of allowed hours. The report says Albany Police Department have been called to the park many times over the years, particularly because of violations of the park hours. And as we heard here, the Albany Police Department thinks the complaints have gone down dramatically after the timing lock was installed. This is not the reason. The reason is that there's been no response, so we just give up. You know, all that happens, if that happens at all, is the police show up, shoo the people away, don't fine them, don't discourage them from returning by giving them the ticket that they should have for years. As far as I can see, in the end, the users of the dog park are being granted just about everything they've asked for over the years, and the neighbor concerns have been ignored. While the survey was welcomed, especially under the auspices of the RCS director, intent of, quote, building a real dog park in Albany, take a breath, it's not at Section B, close quote. It has resulted in a biased report dismissive of neighborhood concerns that in no way meets the legal standards of an EIR. And I'm going to run out of time, so let's go to the bottom. Further, the survey should and could have demarcated those who live immediately adjacent to the dog park. People on San Carlos or even the southern end of the 600 block of Carmel are not exposed to the problems, only the potential amenity of a dog park. I don't know for sure, but those who I do know have long expressed our concerns about the dog park and biases of the city. Finally, the financial impact of the report states, there's no cost to designated Section B as an official dog park. I want to draw the council's attention, though it may be somewhat difficult to assess, if we ever sell our house, I will certainly be looking to how the dog park may negatively impact its value, and will consider the city financially responsible and take action accordingly. I'm sure that there are many others who would follow suit. The fact is that this whole thing has seemed a charade from the beginning and continues as such, only adds to this eventuality.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to start with a comment that I know that outreach is very difficult. It's a lot of work. I've done it. And this is one of the most impressive outreach efforts that I've seen while sitting on the council and by volunteers. I'm just really hats off to you guys for this. Do other council members want to comment? Sure.
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, also, thanks very much to our subcommittee. That was a ton of work, and it was well done. You know, I'll just state, since I am sort of a remote neighbor in this neighborhood, and I haven't been swimming a lot lately, but I used to swim quite often. And when I did, I'd walk down Thousand Oaks, and then I'd turn right, go walk right along the dog park, and then cut over to the swimming pool. And my overwhelming impression was that it was a pretty cool scene. The dogs seemed happy, the people seemed happy. I never, and granted I wasn't there 24/7, I never saw any fights, well, except one that I actually accidentally instigated. But that's a funny story, but never mind. So my personal experience as an Albany resident is that it's pretty cool. Now, let me tell you about the dog that I live next door to. Sweet animal, completely neurotic, barks hysterically at any living creature larger than a sparrow, all hours of the day and night, especially my cat. Squirrels drive it berserk. And there's, as far as I can tell, there's nothing I can do about it. You know, I'm not going to poison the animal. So if you think you're the only people in town who suffer from the ill effects of dogs, these folks could do you a survey, and I think you'd find the issue of people who don't like dogs or barking dogs. And I also worked at home before I retired, and yeah, it drove me crazy when I was trying to focus on writing and there was a dog up the street. I used to walk for 5 minutes to go pet him and calm him down so he'd be quiet for 2 hours so I could get some work done. So your problems are real. I understand that, but I have them just the same, and I don't live anywhere near that park. And I think a lot of people in Albany do, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't own a dog. I wouldn't. I had tons of dogs as a boy, and I really appreciated them. The cat I have showed up on my doorstep 15 years ago. I didn't want him either, but he picked me, and that's the way it is with cats. So I don't know. It's just life to me. If we could get rid of all pets, should we? I don't know. That's an interesting ethical question. But it's a bit, it's a problem. The New York Times had an article on just this topic a week ago about a dog park in a wealthy neighborhood. Same. All the issues are just the same. Except all those folks had more money than us, so they fought harder with each other. So, there's got to be a compromise. I don't quite understand with the issue of what the issue is about formally or not formally making it a dog park. I'm happy with the status quo. I think all the suggestions are pretty good. I think getting the bodies over on human bodies, that is, on further away from the houses is a good idea. I think landscaping and planting a row of trees could be a sound barrier and a visual barrier. Some people might prefer something else, but I'll just close by saying I had friends who had Little League kids, and if you think people don't like dogs, one thing that people near the park don't like is little boys hitting baseballs into their yards. As I was there once, and there was an angry confrontation. Some guy, baseball rolled up into his yard and stormed out of the house and yelled at this kid and his dad, and I'm like, was that really necessary? So we could turn that back into a nice grassy area, and then kids would be throwing balls around, and then some neighbors would object to that. So, I will say this, but being on a city council, you just can't make everybody happy. So I don't know what the trade-offs are, but I think they're really messy. So I think doing some of these improvements are worth a try. They're not super expensive. And then, I don't know. I don't know. There's no perfect solution here, and that's what I'll end with.
Councilmember Maas.
Okay, well, several comments. As was said before, thank you very much. That was some of the best kind of pre-work that you did in terms of the surveys and looking at all these possibilities. Is one of the best presentations I think I've seen while I've been on council. That part was great. To to the neighbors. I'm probably one of those people that has a dog that yaps a lot, although it doesn't yap. We don't go to that park. It's not yapping in that park, but it will yap in our backyard when it sees a squirrel. We're slowly training the dog to stop doing it, and it is slowly learning not to do that. I think that's possible for all dogs, but it really takes a responsibility of dog owners that I don't often see out there. One of the things that I wondered about when I was looking at this, where I live, our de facto dog park is Terrace Park, which is an open area used by lots of people, dog owners, little soccer leagues. A lot of activities take place on the lawn area there, and they all seem to coexist pretty well. And I've wondered if part of the issues that stem out of this particular area is the fence around it, even though that's part of what 80% of your survey say the dog owners like it because it has a big fence. I wonder whether the solution might be to take that fence down, say, yes, this is a dog area, and put some amenities in, put some kind of watering dishes, trees, benches, make it a community meeting area, but don't make it an area where people can just take their dog, set it up, and let it run around unless they, in fact, have control over that dog. I think because these fenced-in areas, particularly the fence at that location is so tall, it looks like a kind of a prison fence. And I'm wondering if some of the dogs that are ending up there are dogs that might be more aggressive than dogs, people wouldn't get away with that at Terrace Park, or they wouldn't get away with that at some of the places which are wide open because their dogs would either run away or, it just wouldn't work for them. Mm-hmm. We might be better off saying, in the very least, taking that fence down to about 3 or 4 feet. And, but my preference would be actually getting rid of it and just saying this is an open area. Yes, you can run your dog there. If your kid wants to play out there, they can play out there. Put in amenities so the dog walkers can sit and talk. The whole dog scene, as far as I can see, is basically a owner social scene. In Terrace Park, it's a whole bunch of neighbors go up there with their little dogs and chat. Dogs run around. Occasionally they bark, but for the most part, they're fairly well behaved. When kids want to use it, for the most part, the dog owners take their dogs off the fields and let the kids use it. It all coexists in a way that I think works better than what I'm seeing, although I have not spent time in this park, but at least from my understanding of how well this works. I know that's kind of a radical idea to say, take down the fence, because, a lot of dog owners would say, oh, well, my dog might run away. Well, then, maybe you shouldn't put your dog in that situation. Maybe your dog should be under voice control, as we say they need to be in parks. I also wondered, looking at this, do people complain about dogs? Since the other part of Memorial Park, you could go there at 8 in the morning with your dog and walk it around. Do you have the same issues there? You guys are all closer to Section B, so I don't know that you're as aware of what's going on there. But it may be that as many dogs are showing up on the other part of Memorial Park, not just, when you got to walk your dog in the morning, you got to go to work or go wherever you're going, you're going to take your dog out either around the neighborhood or you're going to take it to the park to throw a ball or whatever. Do the same issues, are they created in the rest of Memorial Park? I don't know. I guess that's a question that perhaps the police could answer. I don't see the issues of no fence, because Terrace Park doesn't have a fence. I don't see the same kind of issues happening. It seems like a better balance of live and let live going on there. And if dogs do show up that are more aggressive, they're pretty much, the dog community up there just shuns them, and they don't keep coming back. So that's my comment. I mean, I know that's not what's before us, but I do like the idea of having a place where dog owners can go. I'm not so sure that the fence is helping that situation. And I think the types of amenities that were talked about, the trees, the benches, the water dishes, those are all great. And again, at Terrace Park, we have a drinking fountain that has a low section so dogs can go up and get water, and it seems to work for everybody.
Okay, Vice Mayor McQuaid, any comments?
Well, first, I'd like to, second, third, whatever, my thanks for the work that the three of you did. I think you're the poster child for subcommittee reports going forward. We'll use this as a model for other advisory bodies. They see, look what they did. I think some different signage. I like that one from Berkeley about, be a good neighbor. Somewhere in the report I read about neighbors had concerns about dog waste in front of their house or near their house. So maybe, like we had the bar, I don't know if we had them, but some of the bars on San Pablo, we are now putting up signs, be a good neighbor, be quiet, don't take your liquor outside, all that. Again, another kind of a sign that says, remember, you're in our neighborhood, please don't let your dog leave a calling card in the neighborhood. I think another sign like that would be good. Moving the gate sounds like a reasonable approach. Benches, water, trees. Obviously be careful with the trees that they don't get to that height that you can't see through them. That would certainly be a problem. I understand the concerns of the immediate neighbors. And I'm trying to think of different ways of helping the neighborhood. It seems like the majority of the people that use the dog park use it well. And so we don't want to ruin a good thing for a few people that are causing problems. But on the other hand, those few people are seriously impacting the neighbors, so we do need to deal with that. But I think some of these steps would be a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Yes.
There's one issue we didn't discuss. How many days a year is the park open?
So yeah, it was mentioned briefly. My understanding is the park is one thing is as a multi-use field, it's the city has been, the Parks Department has been closing it for 3 months in the winter and then whenever it rains. And so when you add all that up, it was over 90 days just for a traditional 3-month closing, which, and then also another 30 plus days for rain. So it was closed almost 123 days, I believe is what it was. And so a huge percentage of the year. That was one of the main reasons why we heard people saying over and over that we'd like to see a year-round, availability. And if there's a way to make that, even if it's not year-round, make it a lot more available, I think that would answer that need.
Just a quick nod of the head will do. Is it more peaceful in the neighborhood when it rains and the dog park is closed? Okay.
We do that close down because of the grass surface, so it follows the sports fields closures, so basically around Thanksgiving, and then typically we've closed it till February, but we actually open up the baseball field at the end of January. But the past couple of years, we've just had late rain and odd days, and so we do that in an effort to maintain that grassy area. So when the neighbors say there's a lot of dirt patches, that's when we get a lot of rain and we open it a little too soon. It also gives us a chance to do maintenance. So we've reseeded the area on kind of every other year to help have that grass grow back.
Okay, my comment on this is, first and foremost, I think that the goal here is to make the situation better for everyone. I think it is time after 20 years to give up on the idea that it will not be used by dogs. It's a very well-established use. Environmental documentation has been done. It will be used by dogs. Let's figure out how to make it better for everybody. I think that the ideas the subcommittee has put forward are very good, especially moving the entry. I think that some of the problem with dogs is when they first arrive at a dog park, they are wild with excitement, and there will be barking, and there will be encounters between dogs and things. Getting that over to the edge seems like a great idea. I personally feel very strongly from my visits to Section B that we really must provide benches for, there are people who come who are elderly or disabled, and they have their small dog, and what they want to do is sit down and let the dog play. And I think that we really, it's unreasonable not to accommodate that need of the elderly and disabled. With regard to the fence, I quite agree that the height, I suspect that the height dates must have had some contemplation that children would be playing ball games, and that fence is there to prevent people's front windows from being broken and may no longer be necessary. I would love to see us think about a hedge. If the police are comfortable with that, hedges can be quite effective for both visual screening and, to a certain degree, for noise screening. So I think that that's all worth exploring. But our question here today really is these 3 items, and I heartily endorse all 3 of them, that we designate this officially as a dog park so that any impediments to improvement can be overcome. But that, number 2, is that improvements be made, that we adopt measures that will reduce the sound, that will make it easier for elderly and disabled people to use the area, that we move forward with good things that are going to help everyone. And finally, that we look for other areas. I do agree that clearly we need additional areas. Perhaps we need a small dog place, but this, to me, is a wonderful step forward, and I heartily endorse the subcommittee's recommendations. And I would be happy, oh, well, let's see, we've done public comment, so we're on council comment. We can.
And I would like just to add that I'd like to get a cost estimate on lowering the fence.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, a couple of things about the fence. One is some of the comments we got in our workshop in particular was kind of a Goldilocks scenario, not too low, not too high, kind of just right. And some people were thinking that the Section B was too high, like some of you have said. It does feel it's very high. There's another dog park we looked at in El Cerrito on the Greenway there that's also right by homes and apartment buildings that has like maybe a hip-high fence. And the issue with that, people came up to us and said, one person said, oh, my son and his family live near that. They used to go there, but then their dog leaps over it. And so they just can't go to that dog park anymore. So it can't be too low and too high. Yeah, so.
You guys, hang on. I think we're getting too deep into design and preferences. I think we should keep it at a very general level. We're getting close to our witching hour of 10:30.
Right. So my final comment is that let's stick with the current schedule for now.
Okay, my final comment is I think this fence is kind of critical. If we're going to have a fence, I would lower it. And I would lower it to that level that some big dogs could jump over it, because those dogs probably are a lot of the dogs that are causing a good deal of the problems in terms of barking, dog fighting, et cetera. So I would prefer to see a fence that allows dogs in there, but that it comes down to the responsibility of the owner to control their dogs. Even though if you put up this thing with the giant fence, then it's like, I can let my dog do anything. It becomes sort of the go-to attitude. If the owner has to keep responsibility of keeping that dog from barking too much or from fighting, then they're going to have to take on that responsibility. If we make it too much of an area for dogs to do whatever, then I think you start creating issues. So with that, I would like to go forward with this. I don't have a problem with calling this an official dog park, but I really do think we need to revisit that one aspect of it, which I don't think anybody was questioning, but until you mentioned that there was talk about heights, but amenities are key to making this really work well.
I'd like to move, do we extend until 10:45?
I would like to make just one quick comment about the fence.
There's a motion on the floor. Wait a minute.
Yeah, hold on.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Can
Do you
we?
want me to take a poll? Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuay?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
Yes. Okay, come on up, Todd.
Without a tall fence, you can't enforce the hours. That's the concern. That's why we haven't made any recommendations about lowering the fence.
Understood. Okay, do we have a motion?
We need a motion?
I would make a motion that we move forward with making this an official dog park with the idea that we need to hear about.
We've got this resolution 2019-70 with 3 points of resolution. First, that we maintain the current hours of operation of 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. Second, develop a detailed plan for minor improvements to the area, including installation of benches, improved signage, perimeter plants or trees, relocation of the park entry, and addition of a double gate. And C, explore possibilities for an additional location for a dog park. If you'd like, we could add a D of explore possibilities for different fencing.
Yeah, you could add that on to B also, and double gate and explore lowering the fence, or maybe even, I don't know how you get to this, but doing away with the fence or replacing the fence with shrubbery.
If we could make that a D, things to explore.
Okay.
I think that B are things that we're talking about going forward with and are going to be needed regardless of what kind of fence we end up, or no fence.
If we get too far along with double gates and some of these additions, the fence question becomes moot, because you then have things that you have to, might be more challenging to.
I think if we include it as things to explore, that is something that the dog subcommittee and the Parks and Recreation and the staff will all need to be very mindful that we don't, for example, we don't choose a hedge that grows as high as the fence that is there right now, because we might be removing that fence and replacing it with something else. The idea would be these things could be, they could move forward with D, and being mindful of C and D. C being exploring possibilities for additional locations, and D being explore fencing alternatives.
Okay, I would accept that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is that a motion? Can we take that as a motion?
That would be my
Okay.
motion. Okay.
Great. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We've got a motion and a second.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuay?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, we are reaching the end of the meeting. We are up to item 13, and as we have now discussed several times, cannabis policy will be on a future agenda. Are there other agenda items that people would like to mention that we're going to need in the future? Okay, and 14, announcement of city meetings and events. We have a nice list here of various ones, and
the big walkabout.
It's the big day on Sunday. We hope to see you all there. And with that, if there is nothing further, then we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.